Sounds great.
Right there.
Thank you.
Yeah. So anyway, I showed her.
Here. I can't control it. You can control it.
Real identity.
Rich, this is beautiful. So right.
You got my summary of 9A.
It's not on? Oh, right.
Hi, Mary, this is Roy. Can you hear me?
Oh, okay.
Yes, we can hear you.
They can hear us at home, apparently.
Oh, there's
All right.
Paul. Yeah.
Well, you can hear
Fred,
me.
you want
I think they're muted themselves.
It'll give you more space if you want to take
I
that.
can't go much further.
When you take that chair out, give yourself more space.
You just don't want to sit around. You don't want Peter sitting on your lap, that's why you're trying to push me.
All right, we'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. This meeting will be video recorded and broadcast over local access channel 8 and through the town website at www.eastham-ma.gov. We'll start with public information, select board first.
Not having.
I have one quick thing, a reminder about the library survey. It's only going until April 4th, I believe.
April 4th.
April 4th. And I handed out some little bookmarks at the swap shop this weekend, and everybody I asked hadn't done it yet, so I think that's a good place to hit people. Yeah, it's online at the library. You can just give your ideas about what future things you'd like to see at the library. So public information for things not on the agenda. I think some people were planning on talking about the RTE at the time of the appointment, but that's just the application process. That's not a time to say yay or nay or how you feel about the RTE. So do we have anyone doing public information that's not on the agenda? If you get up, state your name, address, and primary residence, please. Yes, and we have 2 minutes because we have
My name
a
is
lot to
Jerry.
do. That's right.
My name is Jerry Grandoni. My full-time residence is in Ashland, Massachusetts. My Eastham residence is on Campground Road. Thank you for this opportunity to speak. I've been coming to Eastham for 54 years, and I've been a part-time resident taxpayer for 20 years. To pay the mortgage and taxes on my small cottage, I rent it out each summer on a weekly basis. This is not a money-making operation. I've had to supplement expenses with my savings each year. There are many part-time resident taxpayers like me, and our efforts attract visitors to Eastham for its vital tourist industry. Our guests dine at restaurants, shop at local markets, and spend money at countless local businesses. We also provide guidance to our guests on where to spend their important tourism dollars. In addition, each of our guests pays a 6% short-term rental tax directly to the town. This money, much of which is generated by part-time resident taxpayers, is used to make Eastham a better place for all of us, regardless of residence. In fiscal year 2023, this tax provided $1.5 million to the town. Excluding property tax, this was the greatest single source of revenue. According to the Eastham Assessor's Office, non-resident taxpayers contribute more than 50% of the property tax revenue. Despite our very significant economic contributions, Eastham is prepared to increase our property tax to fund the tax break for full-time residents, regardless of their need. Providing tax relief to people who are in need is a worthy goal, but the state provides better ways to do it, such as the means-tested residential tax exemption. The RTE is unfair and very divisive. It is the wrong approach to this problem and should not be adopted. Thank you.
Thank you. Could I have your name again? I didn't hear it.
Jerry Grandoni.
Thanks. Hello.
Hello, good evening,
Evening.
and thank you for letting me speak tonight. This is the first type speech like this I've ever given. My name is Warrant Thaler, and I live at 35 West Road. Currently, I'm renting an apartment in Boston, Massachusetts. I'm a new retiree and pondering where I want to live and where I want to work and how I spend time. I spend a lot of time with the Foundation Fighting Blindness, raising money and helping them with their work. I've been coming to the Cape for 62 years, and most of those years were in Wellfleet. I stumbled upon Eastham 14 years ago and I bought a house in Eastham. And I've been following Eastham and Wellfleet and attending many speeches that Jackie's given at our annual event, 4th of July. Eastham is very customer service oriented on every aspect compared to Wellfleet, and it's a joy to live in Eastham. I'm telling all my friends excited about Eastham, the natural beauty and everything. And I'm having a lot of fun here. And my beef on the RTE issue is narrow. We've been consistently told by town administrators that it wouldn't take place until after the tipping point of over 60% of people being part-time residents. This RTE topic is confusing and it's surprising. I mentioned why it's surprising, but let me tell you why it's confusing. It's confusing because it's not clear that we're getting money to the people that need help. A lot of people want to stay in Eastham to maintain family homes, and there are other people that are wealthy who live here, don't necessarily need the tax breaks, but the labels of residents, part-time residents is a confusing one. It's an arbitrary one. I think the gentleman before really pointed out that very clearly. It is clear that pitting residents against not residents is not helpful. And these challenging times, when we have things like making Eastham, revitalizing Eastham, dealing with all the water issues and everything, we need neighbors to work with neighbors and to dig into pockets, pay more when you have to pay more, but not pay more for people who are labeled differently than you. Working together, we can accomplish a lot. And I simply ask that, I really ask you to take time to make sure that you're providing support to the people who really need it. Be careful with the details. These details are really important. And Eastham has such a reputation for customer service with details. It's important you get them right.
I'm gonna have to,
Okay.
we're limiting to 2 minutes.
Okay,
so I'm
and
gonna-
I just want you to evaluate ways to support those in need without using such a broad brush as resident versus non-resident. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Hi, good evening. My name is Tom McNamara. I'm president of the Eastham Part-Time Residents Association. I live in Captain Penman Way and my full-time residence is in Weymouth. EPERDA would like, on behalf of the 1,200 households we represent here in Eastham, to have the select board reconsider its vote on the RTE. Using the town's own data for the average single-family home in Eastham, at 10% RTE, the part-timer will pay $630 more than the full-time resident for property assessed at the same value. At 20%, the difference raises to $1,316, and at 35%, it reaches almost $2,500. The select board's definition of a little is not consistent with what most taxpayers would consider a little. You've already stated the intention to start low and go higher in later years. Now select boards throughout the Cape are eyeing the 50% RTE level offered by accepting the seasonal community designation, which will only further exasperate this situation. A Lincoln Institute report in 2024 looked at residential property taxes relief in 50 states, looking also at the RTE and the homestead equivalents. In that report, it stated that 43 states have small exemptions when compared to Massachusetts, dollar exemptions and or income limitations to participate, or limited participation to targeted groups such as seniors, vets, disabled, military, or first responders. Sounds like a great way to help our own workforce needs. Some states have tax deferral programs where people can defer tax payments until property changes hands or is sold. How about extending this to residents that take the RTE to return some of the appreciated home value back to the community fund? Wouldn't that be a nice return on investment and way to build up a self-sustaining and lasting fund to help those in need? One that grows with changing market values and keeps pace with the cost of owning a home. These are innovative and creative ways that local governments in the United States have helped those truly in need with targeted help. Why can't we in Eastham be a leader in this kind of thinking for Massachusetts, using the home rule petition tool that we already have? Rather than rushing into an RTE process as demonstrated by the January votes, let's take our time, use the community fund and the $200,000 designated for the RTE in the budget to provide targeted help immediately. Then in parallel, let's work collaboratively towards meaningful assistance that's acceptable to all Eastham taxpayers. Together, we can and should do better than the RTE. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom. I see we have one hand. Anyone else in the audience? Parker?
I don't know if this is the right place in the meeting to be asking this. I just had a question. I'm Parker Mumford. I live at 55 Clarks Point Road and I write for the Provincetown Independent. We had reported a couple of weeks ago that the elementary school committee was going to ask on the town meeting warrant for a special education stabilization fund. I haven't seen that article on the warrant yet. Have they not? Have they come before you, Jackie?
Rich. you wanna handle that?
This is public comment, not question and
Yeah.
answer. So
Got it,
I
okay.
can address that during the budget presentation.
Okay, so sorry for wasting time.
That's okay. That's okay. No worries. All right, we have someone on the line to give public comment.
I'm going to promote Tina Acker.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. I'm not going to repeat everything that I've heard over the past few meetings because I basically agree with all the people who don't agree with RTE. To me, it makes absolutely no sense. But what Warren said tonight really
Tina,
does-
if you could state your address and your primary
Oh, I'm
residence.
sorry. Yes. My permanent address is in Amherst, Massachusetts. My Eastham address is 95 Circle Drive in Eastham.
Thank you.
And much like Warren, I love Eastham. I've been coming there for years with my family and finally saw an opportunity to purchase a cottage that we could afford and make livable. And throughout that process, we've met a lot of wonderful people, both part-time and full-time residents. To me, it makes no sense for me as a part-timer to help pay for my full-time friends to live there. But my husband and I are about to make the move to Eastham full-time, and it still makes no sense to me. I would be mortified to walk down my street as a full-time resident and run into some of my part-time friends and realize that they were paying for me to be there. I'm very willing to pay my fair share. I've worked hard so I could afford this place in Eastham. And I would hate to think that it's going to separate us from all of our friends, whether we are on the part-time side or the full-time side. Eastham's a great place, but I think this is a step in the wrong direction. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, I see one more.
I'm going to promote Rob on an iPhone to talk.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you for the opportunity to speak to the board about the proposed RTE program. My name is Robert Medora. I live in Hopkinton, New Hampshire, and also have a home at 565 Higgins Road near Cooksbrook Beach. I'm a recent owner of a modest home since June of 2022. Since purchasing the home, we have spent lots of time and money with the local mortgage company, contractors, electricians, plumbers, frequent stops to the Eastham hardware store, local restaurants, etc. At the moment, before we retire in Eastham in 5 to 10 years, we do rent the house for the summer months, which brings significant income to the town of Eastham. I have no issue with the current tax rate, but also feel that we indirectly contribute to the economic lifeline of Eastham via our renters. It is common sense to me that most remote and the most beautiful part of the Cape would have a majority of part-time residents, very similar to destination places such as Bar Harbor or the Cape Islands or the eastern end of Long Island. If towns like P-Town and Truro have tried to implement RTE unsuccessfully, why is Eastham trying to implement a method that will fail? I realize that pricing of homes, of buildings of homes on the Cape is very high, but that is market driven. Unfortunately, this contributes to the lack of affordable homes, which is a nationwide issue. But because of something uncontrollable, part-time residents will be penalized unfairly with higher taxes. I also understand that approximately 15 to 20% of Eastham households have kids in an offset school system. Does that mean that Eastham should charge a higher portion of taxes to those households? I also understand that Eastham has a large portion of folks of retirement age with fixed incomes. Should Eastham charge this age group more for their elder services versus younger folks in town? Some part-time residents should part-time residents who utilize less town services pay more in taxes than full-time residents. I could go on, but at the end of the day, we all in it together, and we should work and share town expenses equally as improvements are needed. To the board, please reconsider your RTE yes vote to a no vote in August. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you, Rob. All right, we'll move on to our agenda. We have public hearing, or sorry, appointment. The RTE application process, and we have Colleen Mercurio here, our Director of Assessing. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. So I just want to talk a little bit about the whole process and timeline that we're undertaking in this whole project here. Over the past month, we've really begun just with the footwork of getting all the pieces in place in advance of the potential implementation, the RTE. So if the select board decides to implement it or not, we still have to be prepared to do it efficiently and with the least impact to the overlay, hopefully. Therefore, this pre-qualification period that we're about to embark upon is very important. So in the assessing office, we've drafted an explanation letter and a application, which you have in your packets tonight. And our office has also undertaken a somewhat grueling process of kind of checking our list twice. We have a mailing list of who we're going to be mailing these applications out to, and we're cross-referencing it with the first motor vehicle commitment of the year, which has everybody who has a registered vehicle on it, along with the census and your mailing addresses. So we're kind of looking at all of our data. And if we have any reason to suspect that you might be eligible, then we're going to be mailing you an application. So just the overview of the timeline here, that is where we are right now. Beginning this week after this meeting, we're going to be preparing this mailing. So the pre-qualification period is essentially going to stem from 4/1 next week until September 1st. During that time, we're really going to try to promote the application submissions. The greater percentage in advance of the classification hearing is going to equal less overlay that we need to actually cover the process. So it's going to be important for us to do as much as we can kind of in the background to make sure that everybody knows about this and gets out and applies. So we're going to be having weekly drop-in sessions at the town hall where you can sit with either myself or Assistant Assessor Alex, and we'll just help you fill out the application. Both the library and the COA have offered their resources to, you can go in there and they can help you redact the sensitive information and make the copies that are needed, and then they'll pass those applications along to our office. Would welcome any volunteers at any point
Raise my hand.
to help with
Glad to help.
just the receiving of the applications. And that's going to be where all of our energy is spent for the most part, as well as I think the questions that are going to arise. A lot of energy is going to have to be put into that as well. Then we're also going to have home visits for our homebound seniors or taxpayers. So if you just call the office, you can get onto our schedule and we'll work you into our field visits and help you get all your paperwork together. So after we start the submission, we're going to have the vetting period. So essentially that's the whole time frame from April 1st to September 1st, where we're going to be receiving the applications, making sure that they're complete, fielding questions from taxpayers, and then kind of having a stack that's already good, and then the ones that we're going to have to do a lot of follow-up on. There's also going to be investigative work on the back end to kind of to find a lot of stuff out. A lot of these might be cut and dry, but there's going to be a lot of gray areas that we're going to have to do some investigative work. A lot of deed and trust research is going to have to happen. It's not always clear who the trustees are, if that's changed in the background. So there's going to be some additional information required from people who have their property held in trust. Also, in Eastham, we have a lot of PO boxes. So a lot of the documents that I am going to be requesting from you aren't going to have your property address that you're applying for the exemption for on it. So I guess any information or documentation that you have, such as a real ID or the vehicle registration that shows where your vehicle is actually garaged, those are going to be very helpful in painting the big picture here. Other federal forms, if you have them, you can submit those as kind of a supplemental component to this. But many of these are going to be on a case-by-case basis where you're kind of painting a whole picture of this being your domicile. So once we have our completed applications, we're going to have to, as with any statutory exemption, they're sent off to the Board of Assessors for approval. And we can't really do that with, say, 2,500 applications all at once. So we're going to have a rolling process where they're approved pending the implementation. And then after that, we have to get them all into our PK CAMA software and over into Munis for billing. So there's several steps in the actual process. When we get to September, we're going to have our classification hearing. As we do, we're kind of hoping to push it back as far as possible this year, because the further we push it back, the more applicants we might be able to get in advance of the actual vote. At that time, I'll be able to provide you all with kind of better numbers of how many applicants we have qualified compared to how many we deemed potentially eligible. And that's kind of going to give you an idea of how much overlay is going to be needed. So I know that'll be helpful at that time, but we do have to kind of leave some wiggle room and keep in mind that we do need an adequate buffer because we are working off of estimates. So I know my records that I've provided you, all of our spreadsheets and everything have generally gone with a number of 2580 potentials, but the RTE could cause many people to kind of come out of the woodwork. And I think many we didn't anticipate to be eligible might actually appear eligible once we kind of look at the big picture. Like I said, we're going to be considering all facts and circumstances. So it's a case-by-case basis. So again, applications received after the hearing will come out of the overlay, and the ones received prior to it will be built into our tax rate and our levy shift. So mailing out the explanation and qualifications, that's going to begin Monday, like I said, or Friday. Once we finish talking about the process tonight, we can kind of take a look more at what we'll be mailing out just to get some feedback on that. But with regards to the application, we do have a January 1st tax date for qualifications. So that's the tax date for any fiscal year. It's the preceding January 1st. So owners who purchase after January 1st would become eligible the following fiscal year. I think that's important to point out that just because you are here and domiciling here, it's not necessarily an automatic qualification. Also, properties and trusts, the applicant must be a trustee of record as of that tax date. Sufficient evidence would be a recorded abstract of trust or having you listed in the deed. There are several residents who domicile here who may become ineligible with this requirement, simply due to the fact that many people set up their trust for various legal reasons and oftentimes try to remove themselves from ownership to protect their assets and maybe name their children as trustees or other people. But the law states that you have to have sufficient legal and beneficial interest. So fortunately, just living there, the law states that is sufficient for beneficial interest, but the legal interest states that you do have to be a trustee. So in that scenario, some residents could be kind of clumped into the non-resident pool and kind of affect our shift numbers as we've previously looked at them. After that, applicants need to list any property that they, or co-owners, basically. So if there are two owners on the property and the other person has a residence in Boston or something, you can't receive an exemption elsewhere and still be eligible here. So there's some kind of checking around that has to be done, but on the application, you do have to list any other co-owners, and we'll be providing a secondary sheet along with the application that shows you who we have listed as legal owner currently. So you can you'll know who you have to reach out to for affidavits to state that you are not receiving an exemption elsewhere. So a list of required documents, and we'll look at this when we look at the application as well. It's boils down to a copy of your most recent federal or state tax return. So likely at this point in the year, your 2024 return. We don't want your financial information or anything, any sensitive information, your social security numbers, with like all of that redacted. We're simply looking at your name and address. So I think that's very important to point out that please don't give it all to us.
Is it federal or state?
Federal and state.
And state,
Yes.
both. Okay.
And then also a copy of the front and back of your license with the license number redacted. A copy of your vehicle registration. Those are the three things, or four if you count both tax returns, that you'll have to provide to us. And then we'll be looking on the census, and we have access to the motor vehicle excise tax. So those are the other two things that we'll do on our end. And then, like I said before, sometimes it's a case-by-case basis, and you might not have all of these things, so more additional information might be required to just help us determine your domicile. Yeah.
Bob, you had a question?
Yeah, thanks. Colleen, you said that the trustee designation will in fact, I think, reduce the number of people who are eligible. Was that what you were saying?
Potentially, yes. I mean, we didn't sift through each trust that owns a property in Eastham, but we do know, just with also having beach stickers kind of be under our purview, we do know that there are many people in town who have put their properties in trusts and then in removing themselves from it are no longer eligible for certain benefits like exemptions or beach stickers.
I got it. Okay. I just was trying to make sure I understood the direction it would go in, and that makes sense. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. So to continue on with the process, on the back of the application, we do have affidavits from all owners attesting to no exemptions elsewhere, essentially. And then we'd also have an affidavit if you, for any reason, don't file an income tax return. There's an affidavit stating that. We'd also need, wait here, okay, no, I was just gonna state that the applications themselves and all of your supporting documentation is confidential. However, exempted reductions on tax bills are public records, so it would be on our commitment list that you're receiving a tax exemption, and on the other side of it, we're also able to see if you're receiving exemptions elsewhere. We have access to Cambridge's commitments, or, you know, anything in Florida. Right. So let's see here. I think we're trying to have all applications in by September 1st for the exemption to be applied to the first half of your tax bill. So it's really important that if you're a taxpayer and listening tonight, when you do receive this mailing, reach out if you need help. We're here to answer questions, and we're going to have a lot of resources to help you get this in time. In the event that this is implemented, it's a lot of footwork on the back end, but in order to do it right, we have to do this in advance. So I did pass out the applications and the letters. If you'd like to discuss those now, I don't know if you have any questions or comments on them. We kind of fine-tuned the application to contain Eastham specifics and try to make it clear and to have fewer questions when it's received. So it's a little wordier than some, as well as the letter, but we're trying to just kind of, you know, answer all questions in advance.
Yeah. Yeah, I appreciate that you have many different ways to apply. You can mail it in, you can email it, you can drop them off at the assessing department, or there's an online application. So trying
Trying
to
to work
hit,
with
hit,
everyone.
hit every angle, yeah.
Absolutely.
Right.
Jerry?
Yeah, I'm one of those, just for people out there, I'm one of those who has the post office box since I get the mail in Northeast Ham, and I don't have to even put that on, so the PO box is good on my taxes as well. But when you read the application, don't get frightened. If you have a real ID, they required me to put on my street address. And if you own a car and it's registered, on the registration, there's a residential address if it's different from your mailing address, and then it has a garage address as well, which has my 50 Toland Drive, Eastham address. So it may not be fully apparent that those work on the application that you have, but know that they do. So don't be frightened. And even though I was someone who wasn't in favor of RTE, the more people that sign up, the better off we are in knowing what's going on, because we have to have an overlay, meaning some money set aside for people who apply later after September 1st, and we would have to owe them a rebate because their tax bill was too high because it didn't include the exemption if they filed later. So the sooner you apply, the better you help Eastham if we do have RTE in place.
Thank you. Jamie, you have a question?
Just two questions.
Mhm.
Thanks, Sherry. That's good clarification. And I feel like it's one of those things we'll be saying a few times, just so people hear it. But I just wanted a clarification question. So you list census and motor vehicle excise tax. If you're an Eastham resident and your vehicle is, you receive an excise tax bill from Eastham, it's on record already. It's not something you have to produce.
Correct.
And then would it be helpful, as we approach, I feel like it's one of those things, it would be great to start doing it now, but also as we approach the deadline too, having any kind of like situation where you do a pop-up at the library where, Amy is at the library from, 1 to 4 on Saturday, and, Suzanne will be at the library 2 to 3 on Thursday or whatever.
Right.
To help with these applications to, like, if any of us were able to volunteer, or anybody in the community wanted to volunteer to help.
Absolutely. And I think that would be very, very helpful. And I think the more opportunities that people have to go out and get assistance with it, the less confusing it's going
Right.
to be. So I'd be happy to meet with you before that and kind of
Do it.
just make sure, you have the checklist of what we're looking for so
Exactly.
you can submit completed applications and there's no questions after the fact. And
Okay.
that would be very
Sometimes,
helpful.
yeah, it'd be helpful if even we had a sample of like our own or someone else's, so we could say this
Right.
is what it looks like. And then we go through and make theirs look just like the complete one or
Mhm.
sample one or something.
Right. Yeah, that would be very helpful. And I think I didn't mention it in here, but we might also kind of at the midpoint in this, send out a postcard or some type of reminder to those who we haven't received them from that we
Mhm.
think we should have received them from. And maybe on that, we can offer some other,
Some
you know,
dates that they
dates.
could go.
Right.
Okay.
Thank you.
Welcome.
All right, well, thank you. And I also saw in here in the, just a minute, Mary. In your letter that you'll be having Thursdays from 10 to 12.
Yes.
Is that every week?
That's every week.
Every week, Thursdays, 10 to
There'll be
12.
someone there to assist,
In the
whether it's
assessor's
Alex or
office.
myself or Mira will be helping as well. So
Okay.
we'll have some hands.
Mary, you had a question?
Yes, and I appreciate the fact that you're doing all that pre-qualification work, and something you just said a minute ago. Obviously, based on that pre-qualification work, you'll have a good idea of who the people are that are eligible. And wouldn't it be a good idea to get in touch with them before the deadline, if you don't hear from them, rather than waiting if they don't get in touch with you themselves?
Right. So there's going to be kind of a midpoint in this process that we'll kind of evaluate the ones that we've received and the ones that we haven't that we think we should have.
Mhm.
We'll send them a follow-up postcard.
I'd even call them or.
We don't have phone numbers.
You don't have
Yeah,
phone
that's, so we can do what we can. We'll put it out there too. I mean, we have channel, not 18 anymore. What is it?
8.
Channel 8. And we have Facebook, and we'll put all the notice out there that we can
Okay.
to kind of help remind, and then word of mouth is obviously going to be very helpful.
Because obviously the more we get, as everybody has said, the more we get on time, the better off we are.
Right.
For everybody.
If the Independent were to put it in the paper, that would be wonderful.
I'm sorry, what'd you say, Jamie?
Or if the Independent were to publish those dates.
The names.
Yeah, the dates,
Not the names.
not the names, no, the dates.
The dates.
The dates of the deadline, so people were aware of when the deadlines were approaching.
Mm-mm.
Is that a hint, Jamie?
Yeah, he's nodding, thumbs up from our reporter. Right, any other questions from the board?
It's not a question, it's just to reiterate, please redact your sensitive information like your social security number. Do not email it as an attachment to the town. It is important for your cybersecurity to redact that, please.
Well, appreciate all your hard work and
Thank you.
in this short notice we gave you. It's been,
Thank you.
well, it's been, what, 8 weeks or a
Oh,
little over 8 weeks.
Yeah, it has. And
So
long and short.
appreciate. We haven't had to hire anybody else, so. we're
No, and I
just-
want to just make sure it's clear that there's a lot of work this year on an implementation. But once it is done, not that it's you forget it, it's still work, but this first year is why Colleen's here explaining this process to you, because in the first year it is a lot of work, but going forward, once we get all the information, it's updating it year to year, and that becomes much easier to implement, to carry on than the first year. So.
Thank
All
you.
right, well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate your time. Yeah, all right, next we have public hearing joint with the Finance Committee.
And I'd like to call this meeting to order. We have a quorum today. Thank you.
All right. Rich? You're on.
Okay, here to walk you through the budget hearing. Before we get into the presentation, I do want to just share on our website, which I'm putting on the screen here. We have a page called Townwide Financial Planning. And I point this out because I hear from people, whether I'm at the library or in the community or elsewhere, comments on Facebook that, some information is not available. It is. And Jackie and I are always available to answer questions and walk people through some of these things because these are complex. But this is our FY26 financial planning process. We start down here with the first thing in July, August timeframe, doing a multi-year projection for the next 5 years of what our tax levy and tax rate and tax burden looks like, and incorporates all of our projected operating budgets and all of our projected debt and capital plan. Then we close out the year, usually in September, and we do a year-end review to identify exactly how we performed to our prior year's plan and how and why we generated free cash or other surpluses that may or may not have occurred, and hopefully no deficits. Then we establish a budget schedule with town meeting, working back from town meeting, considering the select board and the finance committee schedule. In the late fall, early winter, we come out with the first draft for our capital budget. It's a 5-year capital improvement plan. And from that, we derive what we think the capital budget will be for the upcoming year. We update that if needed, which we did this year. We give updates on the draft, how the operating budget is looking before the end of the year. Then finally, in January, we have a budget presentation and have a complete operating budget book. And in this book is very detailed line items for every single department, their staffing levels, where all the staff belongs in the collective bargaining agreements. It includes our revenues that we're using to supplement the budget or minimize the tax rate. And then finally, we have our budget recommendations. And then here we are tonight for FY26, our final budget recommendations and their budget hearing. So there's a lot to it. And thanks to the Finance Committee, they've been working every week since the last week in January, meeting with every single department head and going over those budgets and asking questions and getting explanations as to why we do what we do. And so with that, I'm going to show you the presentation that was in your packet for the budget hearing.
You don't have it?
Our FY26 budget proposal is a per your instruction, a level service budget, meaning that citizens can expect to receive the same level of services that they've received in the past. The only things that increased in this budget are things that are contractual or inflationary pressures we feel in various areas. And of course, most employees get a either cost of living adjustment or a step increase based on collective bargaining agreements that cover 3 years. There is no new staffing proposed. And this budget reflects the final year of our 3-year approach that we've endorsed the last couple of years, where every 3rd year we go through a collective bargaining cycle. And we felt that it was important that instead of just sending the article to town meeting to ask town meeting to approve collective bargaining agreements, that it was also fair to let them know the cost of it for the life of that contract, the life of the 3 years. And if that cost necessitated an override, that we'd ask them right then and there to let them know the cost of that collective bargaining agreement for all our town employees. So that happened in FY '24, in '23 for '24. And town meeting approved an override to fund those collective bargaining agreements, and kind of the inherent promise in that is we wouldn't come back and ask for overrides for the next 3 years. We haven't for that budget, that base budget. We have for things that town meeting has wanted to add. And of course, the big one last year was increased special education costs for the school and shifts in enrollments. The school budgets, especially at the district level, are largely out of our control. But we did add 4 new police officers in the interim year, and that's why we had an override, not because our base budget was not properly funded. So this is the 3rd year of that approach, and continues our core services, and it's been subject to impacts from the school departments. School department did have, we were hoping the special education costs from the prior year would moderate a bit, but they haven't. They've accelerated and continue to be an issue. And so to accommodate that, we got some late breaking bad news regarding special education costs. And so to cover that, we did apply $200,000 of short-term rental receipts to supplement the budget. And the hope is that now we've got a year to figure this out. Hopefully there will be a decrease in special education enrollment, or at least a decrease in out-of-district placements, which are the biggest cost for special education. And if those move away, or at least move up to the middle school out of the elementary school, that frees up. So that's a likely possibility. And alternatively, we will start engaging with the school committee on, reductions that can be made for next year if they don't. And to responsive to Parker's question, we did not receive anything from the school committee about a special education stabilization fund. That being said, I'm not sure how receptive we would be. Certainly, we would talk about it as the finance committee and select board, but we try to not parcel out special funds for special things. We've got a stabilization fund, and perhaps it needs a few more dollars in it to moderate special education costs year for year. But when we have an opportunity to do that, then we will fund that. But I don't know that we need a separate stabilization fund under the direct control of the school committee when we've got one that's under the direct control of the select board and town meeting. So that's probably how we would approach that, and we'll talk to the school committee about that. The other challenge we're going to, well, let me stay on the appropriation side for a second. When we added the 4 police officers last year, you knew originally that was for 4 officers, which would have been a higher override amount if we had gone for 4, so we went for 2. But as we looked at the environment, we felt confident that for the $300,000 override that we did get, that would cover the direct salaries of 4 police officers. So we moved forward and are hiring 4 police officers in lieu of the 2. Part and parcel of that is we theoretically don't have the benefits covered, but health insurance has been one of our traditionally overfunded budget line items for various reasons. It's very volatile. It has a very steep projected increase in costs for the next 5 to 10 years. But more importantly, we implemented a couple programs that have started to become very well utilized in this fiscal year. We have a health insurance buyout program. So if you have a spouse that has insurance otherwise, or if you want to purchase it on your own, we welcome you to do that, and we'll pay you $5,000 to not be on our insurance. And so several employees have taken advantage of that. So it does cost us $5,000, but it saves us upwards of $20,000. We also implemented last year a high deductible health insurance plan option, which is not necessarily for everybody, but for those that it is a good option for, is about a 20% lower cost than our traditional plans. And I think at the last count, we're up to 18 people signing up for that. So knowing those significant savings that were coming on board, we felt comfortable that we could accommodate the 4 new police officers' benefits through those accounts without increasing the budget. And all that being said, the health insurance budget rate went up 6.5%. We budgeted 3.5%, recognizing that we've got a little bit of extra in there that we think we can accommodate to keep everything in balance. Likewise, the retirement benefit actually was a small decrease, and that's because the rate of our salaries and employment statistics that get factored into that calculation from the Barnstable County Retirement Association increased obviously over time, but at less a rate than the other communities that participate in the pension system. And so we actually had a small decrease in the pension. So all factors that will help us to bring on the 4 instead of the 2 police officers. So I guess the overall message on that is that we do expect our appropriation savings to be tighter than they have been historically. Historically, our operating budget line items return about a 3% excess. So we're relatively tight on our budget. To the extent we do have more significant savings, generally there's something very specific that leads to that. So for example, last year, we had about $1.5 million returned of unspent appropriations. But that was also a year in both the fire department and the police department that we had a lot of vacancies actually public works as well. And so we have to budget for 100% of who we plan to be here. But if we have a lot of vacancies and a lot of unspent salary money, that goes unspent. So that was the anomaly in that year. But generally, we're right around 3%. We also, in this budget, continue the financial practice that in your financial management policies, where we're targeting about 85% of utilizing 85% of our actual prior year local receipts. So, and that is because we want that little bit of cushion that in the event of an economic downturn in a future year, that we've got the ability to accommodate that and hopefully stick it out for a year or 2 with our stabilization fund to not reduce services and make cuts. And also this local receipts, this does not include short-term rental typically. Typically up through last fiscal year, we've been recognizing that savings as free cash, and to the extent short-term rentals generated free cash, we transfer that into the wastewater stabilization fund, which we'll talk about in a second. This year, last year and this year, we did utilize short-term rentals because we have a debt service on wastewater planning bonds, and so we utilize it for that. And of course, this year we're also utilizing it as a stopgap, 1-year stopgap on the school special education. Finally, on the capital plan on this slide, I just want to refresh everybody's memory on our approach to the capital plan. That if you look at our capital improvement plan at the very bottom, there's a chart of how we're going to pay for all this stuff. Several years ago, very wisely, town meeting provided for an override, and the voters provided for an override of $400,000 of tax levy to go to our capital improvement plan. That ensures that we have a solid vehicle replacement program and an equipment replacement program for our departments, primarily police, fire, and public works. It does not provide any funding, however, for facilities. So we had a facility study done just before I got here several years ago, and we recently, in this past year, updated that and have a sense of what the annual costs are for the next 20 years to support repair and maintenance on town buildings. And our approach is to fund that on a much of an even basis as we can year over year, so we avoid spikes and changes in tax and requirements to support those buildings and that maintenance costs. There has been, Jackie probably has a better sense than I do, but 20 plus, 30 years plus of deferred maintenance on town facilities. And we, over the last couple of years, have caught up significantly on that deferred maintenance, and the buildings are in pretty good shape. You'll see an item in here on HVAC work. That's the biggest single capital plan item. That's one of the biggest things left that we've got to approach. So we'll talk about that in a second. This page, I'm not going to speak too much to it, and obviously anybody can ask questions. So if you have a question on these pages, but the reason I like to show this page is it shows kind of our budget buckets, and it also shows, if you look at the bottom line, the budget variance is net zero. We're required to have a balanced budget, and we do have a balanced budget. We break it down between the operating budget, which is basically the departmental costs, our annually recurring costs, and therefore they need to be funded by annually recurring revenues. This is an area where if we thought that they were not going to be covered by annually recurring revenues, we would either cut the costs to balance it, or we'd ask town meeting if we don't think we could move on that basis, we would consider an override or some other funding source if it were available. The second bucket is the capital budget, which comes from the 5-year capital improvement plan, and that is funded. Those aren't necessarily recurring, and so this is an area, and I meant to say in the earlier slide, we do rely on free cash to supplement this. So we only use about $400,000 from the tax levy to fund the capital budget. So free cash funds the rest. So that means on our operating budget, as the Finance Committee and yourselves know, that is one of the reasons we budget conservatively, not only to provide flexibility during the year to resolve issues and problems as they come and avoid a lot of bureaucratic transfers or moving money around. It generates free cash, and that free cash is used to fund the capital budget. And if we didn't have that, we would do what a lot of the towns around us do and have multiple debt exclusions on an annual basis to borrow money for basic recurring things that we know are going to happen. To me, it doesn't make sense to be borrowing money for police cars or for DPW duty trucks. It does make sense to borrow money for a ladder truck, which is, $1.5 million, $2 million. But, a $40,000, $50,000 vehicle, we ought to be able to plan for that. And as part of our capital improvement plan, we have a fleet replacement inventory, fleet schedule, inventory schedule, and a fleet replacement program. And so that's what that $400,000 goes to. So we're avoiding borrowing on routine capital items. And borrowing is, for those listening, gets out of control now. It costs over $120,000 between financial advisory services, debt, bond counsel to give opinions on all these bonds, to actually issue the debt. It's very expensive, and you're paying interest. And so if we're generating the free cash, we are saving a ton of money in bond issuance costs, interest, and we have the money available to take advantage of buying opportunities if they present themselves, and to manage our inventory. So it's been a great practice for us. And then the final budget is the other budget items. Largely, this is the funding of reserves, and the biggest one this year is the $1.375 million from short-term rentals that was unused, unbudgeted, and now we're putting it into the wastewater stabilization fund. There's a slide here as to the balance of that fund. I'll talk about that when we get there. We are contributing a few dollars to maintain the current balance of our unreserved stabilization fund, our OPEB fund, and injured on duty fund to help mitigate budgetary impacts when those things happen. Again, those reserves are funded largely from, in this case, all from free cash. Also in this element are other programs that don't quite fit the definition of operating or capital. And so in here is $250,000 for continuation of housing programs, which we expect to be likely a lease to locals program second year. We just got awarded a contract and are working through the finalization of that contract for a program this year, and also a potential deed restriction buyback program, among other things that the Housing Department and Community Development are working on. Also in here is $200,000 of free cash for the first year implementation of RTE, which would be going directly and only going for refunds to people that apply late. That hits what's called our overlay account, and there will be continued impacts on the overlay account in future years with the second, third, and future years of an RTE if it gets implemented. But those impacts are pretty nominal and minimal, and we can handle them in the ordinary course of a budget process. But this first year implementation, it was important to have that, and it is just there for taxpayer refunds. If it is not utilized, because Colleen is, as you've heard from her, ultimately successful in getting the 2,500 or so people she thinks are eligible signed up, then it doesn't need to be used. And then at the end of that year, it will close back to the general fund of the town. It's not being used for any staff salaries or implementation costs. So far, the implementation costs have been pretty nominal, about $6,000 for a one-time software upgrade. And of course, we'll have some postage, but nothing we can't accommodate within our existing budget. The next page here is the budget summary on the water fund, also to be balanced. This year, we had significant increases for the third-party operations contract. So that's why you see costs going up quite a bit from what they historically have been. So we're going to continue work on ways to minimize that contract, hopefully partnering with a neighboring town on sharing of some costs. But the water rates are sufficient for this year to cover the cost of that with a little bit of supplement from the retained earnings. When we think we've got, this isn't problematic in the short term, but in the long term, we're a little bit over 50% of our eligible customers are connected. Obviously, the more people that are connected and paying a water rate, the lower the rate can stay, and the more revenue comes in to supplement this budget. So that's a longer term issue. If that doesn't resolve itself in a matter of a few years or so, that becomes a problem that the general fund then has to help out with. Here's where the rubber meets the road. Everybody likes to know. The final column here with the yellow shading is our tax and levy projection. At the moment, our budget is balanced. Well, it's always balanced, but that balance, use of property tax, has to come within what's called the levy limit, set by Proposition 2.5. And you can see that it is balanced in the middle of this page by just under $1,500. So we've made it. There's no big challenges or surprises coming. Hopefully, we've made it. I'd say the one big surprise or one thing that you hold out to is, or two things really. A is our new growth number, but I work very carefully with the assessing office to track building permits to see where we're coming in to make sure that we're not overshooting that. And second, the state budget typically doesn't get passed till late June or July. And right now I'm working off the governor's proposal. Both the House and the state Senate will have to come up with a joint resolution and come up with their recommendation, and there'll be a conference to reconcile all that. And hopefully that is not too much different than the governor's proposal. If this budget were to pass, the median tax burden, the median valued home, I should say, of $750,000 would have a tax burden of $5,733, $115 increase, which is about 2% over the current year. This schedule shows all the local receipts that go into the building of the budget and support the budget and reduce the tax rate. This shows our other available funds, the biggest one being our ambulance receipts fund, which is people that use ambulance do get billed through their insurance company. And that funds not only the fire department operating budget to some extent, but largely their capital plan as well. This shows the projections for state aid and state assessments. And again, this is the governor's proposal, so hopefully it doesn't change too much from this. And finally, this is how the budget's going to look at town meeting in the warrant. This is the chart for Article 2A. And we've made a little bit of enhancements for this year to hopefully make it clearer for people, provide some additional information. But every single department and every single line item within the department, or the summarized line items, are presented here with percentage increases and summarized at the bottom a couple of different ways between town services, educational services, debt service, and then breaking out at the bottom there in the green section what the cost of education is and what the cost of our debt for the town and schools are. One of the biggest changes is you started to see this year, and is that we had a reduction in our debt service requirements. With the final issuance of bonds for water projects coming up some point in the year, that might not be a reasonable expectation going forward in the near term, because we'll have one more bond to finalize everything. But water debt is starting to drop off now. Here's what the article for town meeting warrant is with the summary. This is the water fund article with the summary. This is the capital improvement plan, multiple years. So you see at this point, the repair and maintenance programs for most facilities is on a straight line basis, and that's because of the study that we had done that indicated the level of funding over the next 20 years to accommodate these buildings. You also see the second line here, $550,000. That's to accommodate HVAC work that needs to happen at the police, fire, and town hall that haven't been, I mean, these are, I don't know, 20 to 30-year-old systems that have never received the attention they need. We are undertaking the fire department HVAC system right now, actually, leaving the police and town hall to do. And we do expect to receive a grant through the Green Communities Program on one of these buildings to help offset the costs. The bottom of the capital improvement plan is what I was talking about earlier, where you see the source of funding. And the key thing here that the Finance Committee pays attention to and we talk about all the time is free cash is a significant contributor to our capital improvement plan and our annual capital budget. And I would say on average, that's about $1.5 or so million per year of free cash is needed. So if you don't generate it through budgetary savings on your spending or on your local receipts, then you'll have to fall back to borrowing or some other method to do the necessary repairs, which is, a classic example of why deferred maintenance happens. I should also say on this page, it also indicates those years where we expect bond issuance. The big number that stands out in FY26, but you will not see in the warrant or in our capital budget, is a placeholder of $160 million for wastewater implementation. We were carrying it for this year because we felt it important to be timely that the overall costs would be reduced by doing something now, sooner rather than later. But the state SRF program has changed the funding of wastewater programs for the moment. And that's funding uncertainties in that level of funding and how they are administering that program make it something we can't do. So we have to see how that works out through the state SRF program. And we also are pursuing other options through the USDA and other grants in case those don't come back. But aside from the wastewater program, you see next year we have 4.7, and then in future years, a couple of $3 million. These are largely discretionary items that we may or may not do. They are included in my projections for the multi-year budgets and tax rate. But next year, in FY27, if all went according to this plan, we do have several town landings that need work that has been largely funded by grants up through now. And we also do expect that a significant amount of those projects, we might not need the full 4.7 because there might be additional grants that reduce that need. But we always kind of project the worst case. So Article 3A in our warrant is we'd have a requirement that town meetings see this plan, and so we're showing it to them. 3B is the action, is where we act. There's 3A. There's no money involved. We're just communicating the plan. 3B is the ask for money, and so these are directly lifted from that 5-year capital improvement plan, obviously, except for that $160 million. Most of these.
Couple questions, if you have any time on this, Rich, right now, or I can wait.
No, go ahead. I'm sorry, I've been just rushing through, Bob, but go ahead.
No sweat. So the $300K for the police station, was that part of the HVAC or not?
What, 300K?
Up under 3A, capital improvement plan, 5-year projection, I think we saw it. Where does it say that? Right up. There it is, number, let's see, number 11.
Yeah, so that,
300,000.
so that's where I think our best bet for an applications for grant funding is probably with the police department. And so
Right.
that's my placeholder to indicate $300,000 grant.
Yeah, that's the GRT there in the
Yeah.
next column.
Right.
Right, we saw the source. I'm trying to figure out what the money is for. I'm sorry if I wasn't clear.
Oh, it would be for their HVAC, yes.
Okay, so it's more than, okay. And what is the, there's like 400K over 4 years on the senior center. Is there a new building being thought of, or are there a massive amount of upgrades? It just seemed unusual.
That's a great question. Actually, I probably should have covered this. It's very important, and our finance staff and our department heads are kind of trained on this issue. When we're doing these replacement programs, these are meant to replace and maintain what we have now, nothing new.
Okay,
So department heads, if we have spend anything over $5,000, we've got a procurement process that requires a purchase order. And if I see that there's anything new, that we'll have a conversation. Our town accountant kind of monitors this as well, and our department heads monitor it. So a lot of things in place to make sure that this money is only going to our existing assets, nothing new. So in the case of the COA, it's not a new building, but they've got some extensive work that needs to happen, especially with some dangerous sidewalks and paving situations, some accessibility issues. And so that's why we're supplementing their normal recurring maintenance plan, which is $65,000, with some more substantial money in the early years, because that deferred maintenance on that building is substantial.
I was glad to see that. I just was curious as to whether it was something new or something being, further repair. I guess it's bringing it up to code is what you're saying.
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
it was outlined in our 2018 building study, but we didn't know where we were going with the community center project. So
Right.
we continued to defer some maintenance. So now we're trying not to do that. And, there was a new roof put on 2-3 years ago. So we're just trying to catch up.
Gotcha. Thank you.
If there is something new, that's not an existing asset that we want to acquire, it does show, our practice is to show it separately. So there could be, good debate if needed as to, do we want to add this to our inventory of, whatever. So no, we don't have a lot of examples of that this year. The one example we do have, let's see, where is it here? The library, I believe. Down at the bottom. So all the recurring programs are listed first, and they are listed as something as a program, right? Meaning that it's annually recurring. Versus this one request, 3H, there was a request for a outdoor creative play area at the library. That's not something that exists or is owned, and that's why it shows separately.
Okay.
And then, of course, we have other budget items. I had indicated that most of those other budget items are funding of reserves, and you can see those listed here. Down at the bottom, you can see the projected balance of those reserves. And our stabilization fund, we expect to be almost 2.9 million. We would like to see that it's appropriate level of funding for our budget for unreserved needs, but perhaps could be higher to stabilize operations, particularly the special education situation. So we could add some more for that. The wastewater stabilization fund is looking to be about $3.5 million. I'd like to see that ultimately doubled. And the theory on that is we want to cover in the first years of a treatment plant operation, you don't have all the flows you need. So the first year you kind of have to subsidize. And I'd rather not subsidize that through the tax rate. I'd rather subsidize it by us setting aside the short-term rental money, which was the intent of the legislature when they voted this law and these proceeds. It kind of gets forgotten that this was the reason why it was voted, the short-term rental tax was voted. Some towns used it for balancing their operating budget. Other towns used it for housing. But from the state's perspective, they considered this their 25% contribution of funding local wastewater projects, even though it's not their money. But in the old days, it was a 50% federal share, a 25% state share, and a 25% local share. And that's long gone.
Yeah.
So they considered, short-term rental their 25% share. So we're honoring the commitment from the legislature for that purpose by putting this stabilization fund. And it probably takes a good 3 years to get all your phases and all your streets and all your flows flowing into that treatment plan before hopefully it's self-supporting. The other part of, and that's probably about what we have in there now. And we would like to have a few dollars in there to stabilize tax rate based on the timing of debt service payments. We don't want to have spikes up in one year just to go down the next. We want to have it as smooth as possible. So having some money in place to do that is helpful. We have an OPEB fund, which is, we continue to make small progress. It's not as sufficient as it ought to be, but at least we're making progress. And our next two funds basically allocate money to help stabilize and minimize spikes in the operating budget. The biggest one is IOD. It's always problematic in public safety departments in most towns, because if somebody goes out injured on duty, by law, we're required to pay them, but we've got to backfill their shift with somebody on overtime. So you run into a problem with your operating budget, and if you get too many of those in 1 year, we're very lucky now we don't have any of those going on. And so, but in the event that we do, this is almost like a self-funded insurance plan. We can use this fund to help stabilize the operating budget and not have a spike in any 1 year. Also in here is some other budget requests. The big one is the overlay reserve for 200,000 and the 250 I mentioned for housing. Also, of special note, we had been talking about, and it isn't reflected in here, the Residential Taxpayer Assistance Fund, formerly known as the Eastham Community Fund, for $50,000 to get that program started this year.
Rich, this is Roy. Why do you have a slash FTE after that?
I don't know, Roy. I just saw that myself. Not sure.
Okay, good answer.
Could be a mistake then.
Yeah. Rich, could you, the compensated absence fund and compare that with the injured on duty? Is that I'm on vacation or something? Is that what compensated?
Well, sometimes with usually at retirement, but anytime at separation, we're required to pay out vacation time.
Okay.
And in the old days, so to speak, when one person left, they'd get paid out some vacation time. But, the person that came after them came in at a lower rate, and there might be a month or two in time, so you had money within the budget to do it. But nowadays, we're trying to get people replaced as quick as possible because we have actual, important work that needs to get done, A, and then B, generally they're not coming in much lower, if lower, than the 20, 30-year employee that was here. So again, to avoid a spike or an impact on the operating budget, this fund will cover payouts without impacting the departmental
I
operation.
just needed to know exactly what the payout was for. Thanks. I'd forgotten.
Rich, Bob here. One more question. Do you and or the finance committee decide how much to contribute to these projected balance of reserves? I mean, I'm just trying to figure out how those numbers where do they come from? How do we know to add $100,000 or $50,000? How do we decide that? How does that?
So we have financial
calculated?
management policies, and those financial management policies indicate target certain percentages of reserve levels based on a percent of our budget. And so that's basically where the stabilization fund comes from, is basically the unreserved fund balance and stabilization fund targets. And that's reviewed at the end of every year with the finance committee. I do a year-end review where we talk about where we thought we were going to be and versus where we actually ended up and what those actual percentages are. So S&P, our bond rating agency, is very well receptive of that approach and has, it's not in this
Gotcha.
presentation, but I'll just tell you, when I first got here, we were considered strong management score and adequate budgetary score. We're now both very strong in those categories, which are the two biggest categories, two biggest points to us that are in our control. So,
I like the whole idea of how you fund this with a conservative approach, and then we, all things being considered, and if we've got any luck at all, there might be some money left over which we can plow into other uses in the following year. I'm just trying to figure out how those numbers are actually created.
Yeah.
How do we know? Is there a rule of thumb on some of these things? Is there a guideline?
there's specific guidance from
Okay.
financial world, municipal finance world, professional organizations. Standard & Poor's has very specific guidance of what they expect to see depending on what level of rating you want to receive. Our Department of
Gotcha.
Revenue, Division of Local Services puts out guidance. There's all kinds of guidance, and you kind of have to collect it all, hash it out, what's important to your community, which is what we did a few years ago, and update and can look at financial policies every year with the Finance Committee to make sure nothing's changed.
I think it makes sense to me. I appreciate the explanation.
And since you mentioned it, Bob, one of the things, I think we've been very fortunate in the last couple of years. We've had a couple of surprises, but nothing of huge magnitude. But I think this is going to be a tough year coming up. Again, we've utilized some of the built-up savings on some of these appropriations, as I talked about. I'm already seeing revenues starting to constrict a bit. We have a cell tower lease that we got no bidders on. So we're going to reissue. And so usually that's an indicator that they don't want to pay the minimum requirements that you put in the requested in their response. And so we'll have some challenges for sure in this upcoming year. But our approach allows us to absorb those and gives us time to react. So.
Okay.
So here's what appears in the warrant for Article 4A for other budget items, individually listed. And again, just because I know it's a sensitive issue, this down here for RTE implementation is just for refunds to the overlay account for those that apply late. And if it's unused, it gets returned back. And that is my quick and it's as quick as I go budget hearing presentation. Don't take any questions.
All right, any questions from the board? I think we've been seeing this for 2 months, so none of it's a surprise, except the school, but
But congratulations.
appreciate you
on
finding a
that
way,
budget.
and yes, thank you.
It is a budget hearing.
I haven't seen.
We're gonna go
a
through the
2%
boards first,
increase
and
in
then
a
we'll
long
go to
time.
the, okay. Bob, did you have any more questions?
I'm good, thank you.
Okay, Finance Committee?
They've been through it longer.
Yeah, I know. They've been meeting weekly, so they're really on it. All right, we had someone in the audience. If you'd like to come up, please. Yes.
Ron Shaw, 65 White Road. I was wondering if we could just give me an explanation. I see investment income has dramatically increased over the last 3 or 4 years, up to the point of actual FY24 of 814,000. And we projected that at 50,000. Can you give us a little history on how that investment income has increased dramatically
Yeah, no, it's good.
over the last 3 years?
Good catch. It's a factor of a couple things. The vast majority of it is we did a bond issue for $6 million for wastewater planning, and we had some water bonds issued that didn't get spent. So we had a lot of excess cash on hand. And so that cash was, so the second part now is to the extent we've got excess cash, we got a relatively new treasurer that I've been working with for a couple of years, and finally got up to speed on making sure that any idle cash balances are appropriately invested in interest, the best interest bearing accounts we can get considering risk and all these other, other cash management factors. And so, and rates actually increased for the first time. And I think when I first got here, interest rates for bank accounts were, 0.3%. And now we're able to get 4.5%, 5% in some of these accounts. So when you got, $6 to $10 million of excess cash laying around at, 4.5%, 5%, you get $800,000. That's not going to reoccur. That money's being spent. And so we no longer have the idle cash on hand.
It's still technically free cash.
Right. So to the extent it's earned more than what is budgeted, that's what contributes to free cash. And that was a big contributor to why we have the level of free cash we have this fiscal year, because, I think we budgeted, I'll make up the number, say 50 grand last year for interest, and we got 850. So that 800,000 is a one-time hit to free cash.
Joan, you had a question?
Yeah, I do. Joan Lockhart, 120 Steel Road. I had a question about the tax rate, Rich, because as I remember on the RTE discussion, the tax rate would go up if we adopt the RTE. And is that reflected in this budget?
That won't be
rate?
determined until we vote.
Yeah, no, there's no reflection of RTE in the tax levy projection and the tax rate projection.
So at the town meeting, that won't be reflected, is that correct?
Well, we don't know that it's a thing.
It won't be reflected until we have the classification hearing in September.
Okay, so it doesn't affect this year's tax rate?
No, because it's the same amount of money collected either way. So there's,
I thought I remember in an earlier presentation
It
that the
affects-
rate went up,
it does go up for everyone, yes.
correct? That
But
some people get a
because you have an
reduction.
exemption, right, but that won't be set until the classification hearing.
And at what point would people see that rate adjustment? Which tax bill?
On their November tax bill, the first half of the 2026. Tax
November
bill.
25.
November 25, yes.
Okay, thanks.
The next bill you get after this. You just received.
All right. Not seeing any more questions. Thank you so much, Rich.
All right, you're welcome.
And are you going to hang around for more? We're going to go through the warrant articles on our end, which you've done most of them already, I know. Yeah, I watched your 3-hour meeting last Thursday.
Last Thursday night.
Yeah.
All at once.
But she was probably eating while she was watching.
It's true.
She was
true.
eating, we were working.
I know you were. Thank you.
We don't need to.
Appreciate it.
And thank you to the finance
All right,
committee.
we'll close the public hearing.
Do I have a motion to adjourn? All in favor?
Thank you very much. Thank you
Finance
for your
committee
hard work
has
too.
Not all at once.
Thank you all.
Thank you for all of the reviewing that you
Yes,
do.
thank you so much. You've been meeting every week for a while.
Yeah,
Yes, they
yeah, it's a big lift. Thank you.
We get him some sandwiches this
Again.
this Thursday.
And we miss each other. And then work. And we're gonna miss each other.
Yes.
No, really appreciate all your hard work, Rich.
Yes, you may. I have some more.
All right, we're gonna start going through the warrant articles. I'm gonna use and we have all 5 of us here tonight, so I'm just gonna use the index, I think.
Oh, okay. I think we.
So I'll ask for, I'll just go ahead and make the recommendations and then someone else can second. We can talk about it and vote.
Okay, that's good. It all has to be a positive.
Right. Right. I'll make a motion to recommend Article 1. All right, any discussion on the authorization and spending limits for revolving accounts?
That's
All right.
standard all the time.
All in favor of recommending Article 1? We have to call the roll. Bob?
Aye.
Jamie?
Aye.
Suzanne?
Yes.
Jerry?
Yes,
And myself, aye.
5.
2A, General Fund Operating Budget. I make a motion to recommend that article.
Second.
All right, any discussion?
Yeah, the only discussion I have is to reiterate again that $200,000
Yeah.
Right.
in free cash is only for the overlay to return funds to Eastham taxpayers if they filed late and they are due a refund.
Whoever presents that article maybe has to make sure that they
Just
reiterate
mention
that.
Yep.
Just to be clear, that is not in 2A. That's in 4A.
Oh,
Yeah.
my mistake.
Oh, it's
Yeah.
in the other
So
budget.
people can vote the
appropriations.
Article 2A free and clear without worrying.
Okay.
Clear without me having to say that. I'm
Sorry
sorry,
about-
Rich.
All right, we'll vote. Call the roll. Bob?
Yes, that's fine. Aye.
Jamie?
Aye.
Suzanne?
Yes.
Jerry?
Yes.
Myself, aye, 5-0. 2B, we'll make a recommendation or a motion to recommend Article 2B, the Water Enterprise Fund operating budget.
Second.
All right, any discussion? All right, we'll vote. Bob?
Aye.
Jamie?
Aye.
Suzanne?
Yes.
Jerry?
Yes.
And myself, aye. 5-0. I'll make a motion to recommend 3A, the 5-year capital improvement plan.
Second.
All right, any discussion? All right,
Reiterate again that we don't have that wastewater 160 million that's been in there before in this because we're unsure of funding from.
So it's
well, it'll
still
move
in
up.
the fa-
It's still
five-year
in.
plan.
Still in the 5-year plan.
I didn't see it in there.
Yeah, it's in this year.
Well, it's in this year, but it'll obviously get kicked down to
Oh, is
the
it
next or
this year?
following year.
Okay,
It'll
all
get
right.
picked
But I also,
unless they come through by the end of the year.
I didn't cover this in the budget presentation and because it's not part of the budget, but I think it bears a little bit of a mention is, we do have a funding plan for wastewater that's as
Thank you for saying that.
negligible impact to the tax rate as possible. Based on the old rules of SRF, which we're hoping come back to be the new rules again, we have a 0% interest loan, which is huge savings to the community. We have a 25% subsidy for the Cape and Islands Water Protection Trust, and we have $1.5 million of short-term rental receipts to apply to that debt service, which leaves
Per year.
for a year.
For a year.
And if we follow through on our financial planning, stewarding debt drop-off from water project debt that drops off, so that, when I first did the calculations, I don't want to get anyone too excited, but it was the impact to the property tax rate was $100 if we could hit all those targets and have our wastewater plan implemented. And so, cross our fingers that we can go back to what some of those that were funded at those levels and get those 0%. That didn't even include debt forgiveness that we might get from SRF on the water fund. On a $130 million project, we got $15 million of debt forgiveness. So if we got debt forgiveness on wastewater, that would knock that $100 down even further.
Doesn't wastewater SRF funding also have a longer payback?
No,
Oh, they don't. anymore.
USDA does.
It's either 0 or,
but we're talking to the
Longer.
USDA. It charges us a small interest rate, but is a 40-year payback, which is appropriate for this type of infrastructure. And they also have a grant program for up to 25% of your debt to be forgiven. So, we continue to work the plan. It's a big number and people ought to be concerned and ought to be informed about it. But, we'll have more detailed discussions when it's actually on the table. But, I want to set the table now is we do have a funding plan. And if everything comes back to the way we anticipated it, and we expect that in some extent they will, that this is a doable thing.
And if it's not, if we don't get those funding sources, then we're not going to be recommending it.
Right.
right. Period. All right, we have a motion and a second on 3A. So we'll call the roll. Bob? I think that's what we were on, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, aye.
Aye.
Jamie? Suzanne?
Yes.
Jerry?
Yes.
And myself, aye. 5-0. I'll make a motion to recommend Article 3B, the capital budget.
Second.
Any discussion? All right, we'll call the vote. Bob?
Yes, aye.
Jamie?
Aye.
Suzanne?
Yes.
Jerry?
Yes.
Myself, aye.
And 3B is what we're spending this year and where it's coming from.
Right.
Right. All right. 4A, I'll make a motion to recommend 4A, other budget appropriations.
Second.
Now you can talk about your
Yeah. Now the
$100,000 RTE
The
overlay
RTE,
account.
yes, on K in the, is $200,000 for the overlay for our TE. That is not cost to implement for staff or anything. It is solely to reimburse taxpayers who filed late and paid the higher rate in the November tax bill and we have to give them a refund. That's all it represents.
Right, I'd like to make sure you guys are aware. I would vote yes on that too, just to be prudent, even though I would vote no on the RTE itself. It looks like it's going to get passed. So in order to be able to, from an accounting and financial, fiscally responsible standpoint, we need to have that money in the budget.
I fully agree with Bob on that.
You do great. We'll vote. Bob,
Yes.
Jamie,
Aye.
Suzanne,
Yes.
Jerry,
Yes.
and myself, aye. All right, I'll make a motion to recommend Article 4B, the prudent investment rule adoption.
Second that.
All right, any discussion?
I think it's a great move. This is, we can get some more funds in investment income out of this.
Yeah.
All right, we'll vote. Bob,
Yes.
Jamie,
Aye.
Suzanne,
Yes.
Jerry,
Yes.
myself, aye. All right, I'll make a motion to recommend Article 4C to adopt the wastewater enterprise fund.
Second.
All right, any discussion?
Yeah.
Please.
Amy, I just want to point out that this doesn't mean or committing us to anything.
Right.
An enterprise fund is an accounting convention, a mechanism that we use in municipal finance, and it's a requirement of SRF to get an SRF loan. So we just want to have it in place so that we can tell SRF we have it, get the points they give us for that, and get approved. For July 1, 2025, even though it's adopted, at this point, there's nothing going into it.
Correct.
So it's just for future use.
Thank you, Rich.
Thank you.
All right, any other discussion on that? All right, we'll call the vote. Bob,
Aye.
Jamie,
Aye.
Suzanne,
Yes.
Jerry,
Yes.
and myself, aye. I'll make a motion to recommend Article 4D, the acquisition of 2845 and 2825 State Highway for housing, wastewater pump station, and stormwater remediation.
I'll second that as well as hit the mic.
All right, any discussion? All right, we'll vote. Bob,
Aye.
Jamie,
Aye.
Suzanne,
Yes.
Jerry,
Yes.
and myself, aye. I'll make a motion to recommend Article 4D, the transfer of 2835 and 2815.
I'll
Wait, they have
second-
different numbers.
Yes,
Right.
I'll second it. They have different numbers because they're the two
Different
that we
units.
own.
Oh.
Two
So just to
that
be
we
clear,
Took.
Yeah,
by-
let's
by
explain
itself.
this a little.
we own one unit in each of two separate buildings of 2 units each. Half of condo unit, and taken by non-payment of taxes. The first article is to take the other 2 by eminent domain. Now, obviously, there's a housing, right now, the units we have, since we do not control the building or the condo association, we can't make improvements on common property, and they're not being maintained. So by taking them for the other units, we'll help control 100% of the condo units and therefore control the land. But the genesis of it was wastewater, because that, where it is located at the bottom of Route 6 across from Salt Pond Landing, is an ideal location for a wastewater pump station. So for future development of implementation of our wastewater plan, it's a necessary thing to take it. Secondarily, on the east side of Route 6 at the Salt Pond Landing, we have been looking for years to upgrade stormwater systems because there's a direct discharge from Route 6 into Salt Pond is really just not acceptable. But on the east side, it's a huge challenge because we've got town-owned land, state-owned land, and federally owned land. So getting anything to happen there is extremely difficult. So having it on the west side, this location allows us to do stormwater remediation for Salt Pond Landing on the Route 6 runoff. And then the third reason, which just caps it all off, was the housing. Now we can actually maintain and repair those buildings, and we would be adding 2 units to our workforce or affordable housing stock. So the first article takes the 2 units we don't own. The second article transfers the 2 that we do own from what's called the tax title custodian, which is our treasurer by law, to the select board, so it can be used for any general municipal use.
And there's history on the stormwater part. There's a history because we have designed stormwater systems 3 times since probably 2010 for Salt Pond on the Salt Pond side of the road. And in 2018, we actually got a $750,000 grant from the USDA to do that. And then we were not able to do it because of all the different entities and the takings. So there is an outfall on the other side of the road. So we really need it for stormwater, A. And then B, because people are going to ask, I know, why can't we just sell the 2 units that we own? And we could by tax title taking law, we can sell those, but then we would only be able to recoup the tax that was owed at the time of taking, which is under $10,000. And our legal fees and our auction fees. We would have to give that cash back to the owner. And we have been wrestling with this for 5 years now. So it's a time to either do it or not do it. And my vision for this would be to try and convince you to figure out how to legally separate the pump station, the stormwater needs from the housing portion, and then see if we could engage a private developer on the housing portion to take that and do some mixed use housing there, because it's a gorgeous property. And the condos on the second level actually have views of Salt Pond. They're both, all the units are 4-bedroom, 2.5 bath. So they're huge, they're cavernous, and they could be, probably doubled. So we could have 8 units there or 10 units there or whatever. So anyway, that's but that's why we're not just gonna sell it.
All right, we have a motion and a second. No, thank you. Any other discussion?
I guess I'll shameless pitch for the water quality in our salt pond could really benefit from it, especially if you're someone who's interested in shellfishing.
All right, we'll go ahead and vote. Bob?
Aye.
Jamie?
Aye.
Suzanne?
Yes.
Jerry?
Yes.
Myself, aye. I'll make a motion to recommend Article 5A, the seasonal communities designation acceptance.
Second.
All right, and Jerry?
The only if my memory's right, just to make sure I'm right, this is, we accept the designation, which we can from the statute, and it gives us the ability to use different programs the state would have, but doesn't force us to use those.
They're all
Yeah, but
opt-in.
We have a choice. There are all of these are opt-in choices. We have more arrows in our quiver, using my dad's thing, that we can use, but we don't have to use.
Correct.
All right.
Tools.
More
Tools in the
That's right.
toolbox.
That's a good point.
And I don't know, I'm not
Microphone,
sure.
Jackie, microphone.
Sorry, I'm not sure if under the Affordable Homes Act, if we don't accept the seasonal designation, whether we'll be able to access all the other benefits. But
Ultimately, we, I guess, the state budget situation and federal funding aside, when this passed, there was some money attached to it, that as these programs get developed, seasonal communities will be able to avail themselves to through various grant programs.
All right. Thank you.
All right, any more discussion?
I'll just chime in. I think that anything that gives us the option to get a little bit more funding from the state, particularly in the area of housing, is something we should be jumping after, trying to make that happen. So I like the idea of getting these opportunities without being forced to do it.
Yep.
All right, we'll call the vote. Jerry?
Yes.
Mixed it up a little.
Yeah, it scared me here.
Suzanne?
At least I didn't say no.
You're the first person I looked at, so I.
Yes.
Suzanne? Jamie?
Aye.
Bob?
Aye.
And myself, aye, 5-0. All right, I'll make a motion to recommend Article 6A, the real estate transfer fee.
Second.
And again, this isn't to enact the fee. This is to request special legislation to enact the fee.
Right.
Which, as we know, even if it gets accepted, it'll
2
come back
years.
differently.
Go back different. This is just going up to the state.
Yeah.
Correct. Jamie?
Yeah, so I was just kind of looking at the numbers that Rich had put together for us, which was really helpful to just see if we went with this restriction where it would only be applied to homes exceeding 1 million, or the amount that exceeds 1 million, not
Correct.
the full, so it would only be anything above 1 million. And the difference between applying it to all properties was significant. And we're trying to find that sweet spot between what the state had put forward last time, which was a 3%.
Mhm.
And I was just curious on the board's mindset of what if we kind of met somewhere in the middle of some of these and went with a 2%, but still kept it at any amount exceeding 1 million, just to try to bring that number up maybe a little bit more without having to kind of expand it to all properties.
Yeah, what was the amount, Rich, 1% over 1 million? 285 or
Plus,
225?
yeah, it was like
225? So
250 roughly.
so it'd be roughly 500 if we went for a
Right.
2% over 1 million.
Not to confuse the matter, but you could also,
This-
you don't have to be specific, right? You could
257.
You don't have to be
an amount
specific.
up to.
3%. Yeah, because that's what the initial,
Two.
and the initial legislation was up to 3%. Right?
Oh, so we could say up to
Leaving that to
3%.
the select.
You could say up to 3% and then 20 years from now, go up to 3% if you wanted to.
Right.
Hmm.
But I just.
But you don't
didn't-
have to start at this necessarily.
Right, and they'll probably do it, I'm assuming they'll do it like the short-term rental tax. If they pass it, we'll have to bring it back to town meeting.
Right, for approval.
For approval, for acceptance from the town, and at that point, we set the amount.
Okay.
Interesting, yeah. I think it sounds better for us to use that $1 million above 1 million, so that someone who sells a median home right now, which is 750, I think.
Won't be paying
so
it.
The buyer,
would-
The buyer.
The buyer would not pay for it, but it even with a buyer cost, it still affects, am I gonna do it when you're negotiating a price at some point, and
But also.
real estate doesn't always go up. So I think keeping it at the million makes them say, especially that's what the state had in its
right?
Right.
proposal that failed. So it's there so that it
More in
just
line
seems
with what
better.
they
If it's
did.
only, if you sell for $1,001, you pay the 1%, 2%, whatever on
On the
$1. So it should, the first million is exempt.
Maybe it would motivate people to keep
Lower-
their house price under.
At 995.90.
Yeah, well, it might, yes.
But probably.
I don't think so.
Because like if you're gonna get an
Right,
extra.
yeah.
It's only the amount over 1 million,
Right, and
so
it's
it's
only
gonna be
Yeah.
minimal for.
So,
But it's something,
Yeah.
it's a revenue stream.
But again, it's something to talk about, but until the legislature, and we know how it works, both bodies are gonna have to
Right.
duke it out, come up with a package, and then the governor has to sign that package before it even comes back to us.
yeah.
Yeah, I think the reality of this is, other towns that have done this, it just sits in committee.
Yeah.
I'm not sure I would expect passage,
I don't, yes.
but what you might expect is maybe it influences lawmakers to
Right.
pass a statewide local option.
Right.
And I like the idea of up to. We don't have to sit here
Yeah, I like
today
up
and
to,
try
yeah.
and decide what it is.
Yeah.
The state
Well,
had
it's not
up to-
real. It's not
Not
real yet,
It's not
Chair.
real. That's right. It's not real, but at least we don't, 1 million up to 3, which is what was in the state budget just before it
Yes.
passed. With it off, makes sense in the sense, here's what you were thinking about, and we're asking you to think about it again, basically, and pass it.
So with that information, Jerry, what I'd suggest, if that's what the board's inclined to do, we'd change the wording to say hereby impose a real estate transfer fee of up to 3%. of the purchase price exceeding 1 million, the exemption amount, upon the transfer of any real property interest in real property situated in the town of Eastham. The amount, the exemption, the fee and exemption amount may be
Yes,
amended by 2/3 vote of town meeting.
I like that.
Excellent.
Yeah,
Right,
I
it's
have
up
to
to
chime in.
the-
I think it's just too much money, quite honestly. I think that, up to 3% on a house that's $2 million, let's say. We've got a number of houses out there that are $1.5 million. Let's use that as an example, not just the median house. I mean, every $1 million is $10,000 out of the buyer's pocket. It's a ton of money that we're talking about here.
Right, so
So-
you'd exempt the first million, so just so
Right,
you're,
right,
so
right,
so
right,
we're
I
all
get
on
it.
the same page. A $1.5 million house would pay the tax on 500,000.
Which
And a
would be
$2 million
$5,000.
house would pay the tax on $1 million. So
Right.
$5,000, yeah.
Right, exactly. I just think the up to 3%, I don't agree. I think the way it's worded, it is still a lot of money.
Well,
I
to
wouldn't go to
Bob's
the
point,
3%.
if there's disagreement as to the up to amount, I guess I would submit that, for the sake of argument, if the amount were 2% or 2.5%, town meeting still controls the amount of the fee and they control the amount of the exemption. So you
So it's
could,
not for us to
so you
decide.
could,
Right.
you could, determine what your needs are in the future, and town meeting can say that's greater or not.
Yeah, I think
Well,
it's
what are
important.
we voting on?
You're voting on sending a
Request for
a
special.
request for special legislation to Julian Sears' office, saying that we are basically, that the town of Eastham is in favor of the implementation of a transfer tax. And if both are bodies of the legislature come up with a special legislation, it will have specific provisions. They never leave it open. So it'll have specific provisions, and then those will come back to the town, and they will have to go through town meeting to accept the transfer tax. So basically, it's a local option that the state will give us, and the town will have to vote to accept it. And then at the time of acceptance, there's either an amount that the state has decided on, or there's an amount that we get to set at that vote. So
Right,
it's a
are we
several
sending-
step process.
I appreciate the explanation of the process, Jackie. I'm just trying to ask, what specifically are we sending them? Are we sending them the wording that includes the threshold as well as the up to %? Or are we just sending them the verbiage that you outlined?
No, the exact article as written is what would get sent to them to.
Right, and we're
consider.
That's what
discussing
I-
potentially
Right,
changing.
okay, so I'll take the tack that this wording is what we would want to send them, and because I do think that, up to 3% I wouldn't want that in writing that we send to the State House. I wouldn't want that at all. I think it's way too high.
But Bob, it isn't our acceptance of it at that point. It's just.
No, I understand,
requesting
but
But he's
But-
saying
but-
he would vote against that. That's all he's saying.
So-
yeah, I'm saying that if I asked, what are we sending to the legislature? Does it include these threshold numbers and up to
Yes.
numbers? Okay,
Yes.
so then I'm voting to send this verbiage.
Okay, I'm just,
He's making a motion, if I'm reading him right, to approve it as written.
Well, I could make the motion. I thought we were just still in
Well,
discussion.
we already did make the motion
sorry.
for what was in there. We were
Okay.
talking about possibly changing that. We haven't yet.
That's, okay,
Right.
well, that's my comment.
I guess I feel strongly about maintaining that flexibility to go up to 3%, especially at a time when we're saying the maximum potential of something, like the top tier, just like when we're deciding on like percentages of AMI or all different things, like we want to leave space for the ability to be forward thinking down the road, of like what people might need in 10 years or options so that they can still access tools that are useful. And so by giving the flexibility of 3%, I think it makes all of the legislative change more useful. if you limit it to a percent that's so low that it's almost mildly effective, I mean, what's the point of even making the legislative change at that point? So I feel pretty strongly that we stick with what the state had originally suggested at the 3%. And again, this is for any amount over $1 million. If someone's buying a $2 million house, like, I don't know, I'm pretty hard to convince that that person's gonna really have to think hard because of this percentage.
I just think that's
It's
completely,
6,000.
completely
$6,000.
wrong. But that's okay.
It's a $2 million house, Bob. I mean, I can't even imagine owning a $2 million house. I'm sorry, but like,
Well, that's why I'm
don't think
saying, I
it's-
don't think, I
I think
agree
you
with you.
need
If you
the
can't imagine
perspective-
it, then
Hey, back
that
and-
money
back
is,
and forth.
it's just the same as for anybody else. I mean, it's a ton of money
It's
that we're
not
trying to
anybody else,
extract.
though.
Well,
Bob, I think we need to keep in mind that this is something that we're bringing to our constituents.
I
So
understand.
even if-
I just
even
think
if-
3% is too high. That's my only
Right.
comment.
that's it.
And
Yeah.
if you disagree, it's your right to disagree.
I guess I'd submit.
Jerry?
Yeah, one thing, Bob, the language will also have exemptions, so it doesn't apply at all if you to transfer to children, grandchildren, et cetera, or spouse. If it's a court order from a divorce decree and you change it, it doesn't apply there.
No, I
So-
read it. I read the
So
warrant.
that a lot, so some of it's away. I understand you're up to 3%. The reason I thought about that is because it's what the state had before.
No, I
and I-
understand. That makes
So
sense that
that's where I feel.
you're trying to make sure that the signal is sent that Eastham supports the notion of this transfer fee. And I support it as well. I just don't think that we should be trying to, excoriate people. That's all.
Okay. So the motion we have though is 1,000,000, 1%.
Correct.
So we would have to amend the motion if we want to change it.
I would make a motion to amend it. I think it's useful to have it match what the state had suggested. So in the event that the state gets a bunch of these in some way, they don't have to necessarily, there's consistency and they don't necessarily have to think too hard about it. We can just be
They
like,
could make
"We
the
liked your
exemption amount
idea."
higher. They could do all sorts of things.
They could do all sorts of things with it, but I just, if it were me, which is not, but if I were to receive a bunch of these and they're this and that and all the different combinations of it, I would maybe find that.
All right, so I'll withdraw my previous motion. And then we can vote on that first to amend if you would like. And then go back and vote the main article, the recommendation.
Right.
So do you
So
want to
she-
make that
He's making a motion to amend.
motion to amend the article?
Oh, I move we amend the article to reflect the 3%, up to 3% over $1 million.
That's
As per what was suggested by the state last time they took it up.
Second.
all right. Any more discussion on that, Jerry?
Yeah, one further discussion for Bob is, I know what you're saying. I don't fully disagree with what you say, but one of the things that really helps me on this one is you can't change the exemption amount of the percentage without a 2/3 vote at town committee, excuse me, at town meeting. So that, if it were just the select board, maybe I would be a little bit more thinking on your side, but when you need a 2/3 vote at a town meeting, that's you've got a lot of support for it, and that's a pretty high hurdle to jump.
Well, I understand, Jerry, that the thing concerns me, if the state comes back with the up to 3%, is that what we're voting? Are we voting on something that they would come back with?
Yes,
Okay,
but
so
not
if they come
tonight,
back,
not tonight, you're not.
no, I understand.
Down the
So,
road.
But what the argument about leaving the 3% that was just put out on the table was because that's similar to what the state had already come out with, and so we would be making less changes to the original idea. So it might have a higher degree of passing. It might make it easier to get through Beacon Hill.
Yes.
And then if that's in fact what hits our town in our warrant, and it requires 2/3 of the people to change it, then I think we would have, I think, changing it becomes more difficult than adopting it. So for those reasons, I still would vote no on that change, on that
No,
amendment.
it doesn't automatically go through at 3%.
No, if the legislation got passed, town meeting by 2/3 majority will have to set the exemption amount
Accept
and,
it and set
and the fee.
Right. So whatever the amount is, has to be approved by 2/3 from the get-go. It doesn't automatically go in at any percentage.
But what'll be in the warrant, you're telling me, is the up to 3%, if that's what the state has.
That's the amendment that you're making.
Well, but this isn't that
That's-
vote. This
No, I
is-
understand that, but the argument to bring it up to that number was twofold. Number one, Jamie, I think you said it wasn't enough money, right? And
Right, if you're
was-
going to implement the program
Right.
to generate a fund stream that's worth implementing.
right, and that's possible. You could argue that point. And the other one I think came from Suzanne, where it was a quite honestly, I forget what she was saying. I apologize.
It was just to make it easier.
Oh, yeah, the 3.5.
On staff, the state,
That-
to be
right,
like,
that was-
okay, they support this.
Right, I didn't buy that one, but I appreciate the argument. I didn't think that was, my concern was if that's in fact what passes, because towns like Eastham submit that verbiage, and we try to do it to make it more easily passed because we believe in the article. Then what might be more likely to come back to us is the up to 3%. And if the up to 3% is what ends up in the warrant, then I would be concerned about that.
Well, but if up to 3% ends up in the warrant, that still allows town meeting to decide, are we going to go up to 3% or are we not? It's up to the vote.
Right. But I think Jerry was making the argument that getting 2/3 of the majority of people at town meeting is a challenge.
Right.
Right.
And,
Yeah.
oh, go ahead, Jerry.
So
Yeah,
if the warrant says 3% and getting
Yeah.
getting people to change that in the town meeting
it
is a
doesn't-
challenge, then
It
I've
would,
got
yeah, I understand what you're saying. This warrant article would say up to 3% because we're asking the state to pass a bill that gives the town the authority to raise the real estate tax transfer fee over $1 million, up to 3%. That's what this would, when it comes back, let's say the state miraculously
Yeah.
votes, passes exactly what the town said, then it comes back to us. And then going in the warrant is not up to 3%. Going in the warrant would be.
Like next
if-
year, say.
Next
or 2
year, the
years.
next warrant for the next year would be over $1 million and a number, 2%, 1.5%.
I see.
Half
So
a
we put
percent.
that number in, the select board puts that number in the following year?
In
If
the
the
warrant
state,
article.
if the state were to exactly adopt the
As it
language
is.
that we
Right.
write, but it
Right,
is
okay.
highly unlikely that the state is gonna take our warrant language and copy paste it with
Yeah.
whatever we get
But
back.
if they did,
But if they did,
what Jerry's saying is what would happen.
we would have a
Okay.
discussion and set a rate that we thought was practical for Eastham to then go vote on.
Deep-
Okay, then that
deep
that
background,
makes sense
Bob.
to me. No,
The
that makes
reas-
sense to me.
Okay, the reason we're doing this is because this legislation has already failed once.
Right.
Okay,
No, there's a groundswell of support by some of the towns in Massachusetts. It makes
Yes.
sense. And again, what I was concerned about was the 2/3 overriding what we put in the warrant. And if we're the ones that identify that percentage or up
Correct.
to number, then I'm okay with that because we have.
Yeah,
some
yeah, because it
control over
wouldn't be to override it, they would have to approve it.
Right.
and
Exactly.
if they
Pick
don't
up.
like the number, so if you don't like the number, you can vote against it when it becomes a warrant article.
No,
See
I-
what I'm
I-
saying?
I-
If they,
I get it.
come back with something wild and crazy, we don't have to vote to accept it.
I understand. Thank you for the clarification, guys.
All right, so let's vote on the amendment first.
Right.
All right, we'll vote Bob,
That's fine, yes.
Jamie,
Aye.
Suzanne,
Aye.
Jerry,
Yes,
and myself, yes. So now we'll vote on
the
article,
amended article.
the amended Article 6A.
Which would include.
I'll make a motion to recommend Article 6A, which is now exempt everything over $1 million up to 3%.
Second. And
All
for
right,
discussion.
any more discussion
The article will include the language that you recommended.
Right.
about the two
And
things?
About the
fee and
the fee in there and so forth.
Yeah.
All right. Everybody ready to vote on that? All right, Bob,
Aye.
Jamie,
Aye.
Suzanne,
Yes.
Jerry,
Yes,
myself, I. All right. I'll make a motion to recommend Article 7A, the form-based code.
Second.
All right, any discussion on this?
Just that it's a great job.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of work.
I have one thing. Paul just came to me and said that there is some discussion about in the Holmes Road section of this plan. We have residential use, we have duplex or multi, yeah. As a use category, and what he is saying is that the planning board won't be able to vote on this until now after the warrant goes to the printers, but they are considering an amendment on the floor of town meeting that would say it's an accessory use rather than a primary use. And that's because a lot of the people that own property on Holmes Road, there's basically, it's our only place to have some industrial use. And so they want to make sure that that is still the primary use and that they can add some residential to that, but it's not, someone can't come in and buy 10 acres and do all housing.
Great.
I understand.
That's great.
And I thought that was a good catch,
That's a good
because I didn't see that when I read it first.
That was something I remember during the presentation being like,
Yeah.
Can we let the planning board know that
They already had their,
no,
Oh.
let them know, give them a heads up that at town meeting.
Oh.
The select board
supports that.
Supports that,
Sure.
that change. Now, I don't know how we do that. I mean, we're doing a recommendation on Article 7B, so that's set, but then we can.
7A.
Are
Tell.
we
Put
able to
something in the
present
summary.
it?
Where's Paul presenting?
Well, you could just
Present it.
vote
I
to
think-
recommend it and then be supportive of the change, or you could defer action to town meeting floor. I don't
Right.
know what kind of
Sir
message that
Liaison,
sends.
you?
It sounds like we support 99% of it, right? This is one change.
Yeah,
And it's a
right.
good change, I
Right,
think,
right,
but
yeah.
it's only one change.
Well, yeah, okay, Jamie, can you let the chair know that we don't have any problem with that, and then we'll just go vote on this the way it's printed.
okay, I'll communicate it to Paul and
Yes.
let him have.
Because I don't think it can be changed now.
No,
It's
no,
through their process. They already
Right.
did their public hearing and
yeah.
So tell him that we're supportive of the change within the industrial district zoning.
that housing is
Right.
accessory.
Housing is accessory. Yes.
And we're looking for an amendment on town meeting floor to that. Is that something that we as the board can present?
No, I think it's.
Someone else has to do it?
Someone.
Let
Play the
them-
planning
Planning
put
The
it-
planning board will do it?
I'll have
Alright,
to put it in writing for.
Yeah, if,
Scott, et cetera.
and well,
Actually, our attorney will probably draft it.
I was
Yes.
about to be, okay, yeah, that's lovely. So did you?
Sorry to muck that up.
No,
but
no,
I
no,
thought-
no,
it's all
no, thank
right.
you.
It's
It's good to have a heads up. Yeah.
That's a good one. I didn't.
All right, we'll go ahead and vote on 7A.
Oh, the 7A.
7A.
Sorry.
Bob,
Aye.
Jamie,
Aye.
Suzanne,
Yes.
Jerry,
Yes,
and myself, I.
I said 7B. My
That's
mistake.
right. I'll make a motion to recommend 7B, the accessory dwelling unit.
I'll second that.
And these are just some updates, so it's more in line with the state
With what the state-
ADU law.
Yep.
All right, any other discussion? All right, we'll vote Bob,
Yes.
Jamie,
Aye.
Suzanne,
Yes.
Jerry,
Yes,
and myself, I. All right, CPA articles. You want to do them all as a one whole Megillah? Or do we want to parse them out?
Do us voting for them as a board
What's that?
for us right now?
Yes. 8A through H. Reserves, Massasoit Road, Housing Institute, playground updates, Wiley Park trailheads, historic properties, open space land purchased, and friends or relatives with autism and related disabilities.
I have no idea, no problem, want to say something in one of them, but no problem doing all at once.
All right, so I'll make a motion to recommend Article 8A through 8H.
I'll
Second.
second. Jamie's got it.
All right, any discussion on these?
Yeah.
Jerry?
I raised on 8A, I had raised a question last meeting or the meeting before, I can't remember, whichever, on the reserve for community housing, where the CPA committee recommends a 30% rather than 10% item reserved for community housing, the 10% being the statutory minimum. And I've learned that, at future town meetings and, the Community Preservation Act Committee and the Select Board and going to town meeting, we can change that, reserve for community housing and lower it below, the 30%, but not below the 10% level. So that's what I was concerned with, taking this money and putting it aside and potentially diminishing the general fund if we needed it for some other great purpose. But that doesn't apply since the town can, we have to approve any use of it and the town can change this. So this now just says we're concerned about community housing and I'm fine with that. So I just wanted to, clarify my position and my questioning from the last meeting, where I'm at and why I changed.
Do we expect this to be set and then are they gonna come back every year with the same
It has,
request?
legally, we have to vote on it every year.
Every year, okay, yeah, sweet.
And we have to vote on each project every year.
I think it just shows a very strong commitment to housing.
And and the committee may come back with just 10% across the board next year. So they're not,
Yeah.
they're not wedded to the 30% for community housing.
I'd also say that historically, at least a couple years, right, there's been appropriations from the CPC to a housing trust, and then that does lose its identity and has to retain for housing. So there's no money recommended going to the housing trust directly. It's being retained by the CPC and their restricted fund.
Right, stays here.
Yep.
Yep.
All right, any more discussion on Articles 8A through 8H? All right, we'll vote. Bob?
Aye.
Jamie?
Aye.
Suzanne?
Yes.
Jerry?
Yes.
And myself, I. And then we have the petition article.
Did we do 7B? Oh, yes, we did.
Yeah, accessory dwelling.
Yep.
Yeah. So 9A, the petitioned article. I don't know if everyone watched the Finance Committee meeting.
Yes.
Finance Committee voted on Thursday 09 to recommend.
Right.
9A. Rich, I don't know if you wanted to give your plug for your awesome financial planning, but if you don't, I will.
Rich already gave it at the beginning of his presentation at the public hearing, all the stuff that we do and all that he's done and setting it up. I mean, we do go over it. We understand, the finance committee clearly does, but we basically understand how much it's going to cost and where it is. And so I think that I understand the problems that the petitioners are seeing in one sense, and the tax rates and so forth, but it's where Eastham is, and it's kind of what we have. We're Johnny come lately on water. And we have consent decrees forcing us on wastewater. And so we have to move forward with these, and there's no free lunch.
All right, so motions have to be made in the positive, so I'll make a motion to recommend Article 9A.
I'll second that.
All right, is there any more discussion on it? Jerry, we'll vote.
No.
Suzanne?
No.
Jamie?
No.
Bob?
Abstain.
Okay, and I'll vote no, so it's 0-4-1.
I'd like to tell you why I abstain. I think that Rich does an incredibly good job. I've had the good fortune to sit with him in at least 3, maybe 4 or 5 one-on-one or one-on-2 meetings. The preparation and the knowledge is far superior to, I think, our surrounding towns. I think what's going on here is people are very nervous about the RTE, and I think this is a stall tactic and I think that was called out on the March 13th FinCom meeting. I think it was correct. I mean, it's a stall tactic in my opinion, and I am not sure about whether or not that's a good idea, to stall on the RTE. I'm very much against it from an ethics perspective. So I would like to be able to vote, yes, let's go ahead and put that in place and have auditors come in and kick the tires. Auditors' jobs are to find something wrong, and I don't think there's much to find, although they will always find something, because I've been on the company side of that, not the auditor side. They'll always find something. But I think that is not what we want to have happen. What I would want to have happen is more thorough thought on the RTE, what it's going to do to the town, the implications of what it means when we implement something like that. So in the stall tactic, I would want to say let's put it on the warrant. Maybe it'll pass. But I also don't want any thought or any hint, anything to point to Rich or anybody on the FinCom or anything about our planning to be suspect, because I think it's the exact opposite. So I'm kind of caught in a quandary for how to vote on this, which is why I'm just saying I'm not going to vote on it. And I hope that makes sense to somebody besides me.
It made sense, Bob. We understand.
Can I answer a question?
Sure.
My understanding of municipal audits is that this language didn't say audit to me, but maybe that's because I sit through audit.
It's in the title.
meetings. Oh, I guess I'm thinking of like the formal audit when you're like
But we do
audited.
that every year.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, you have to.
So
Yeah. Okay.
Well, and
I just want to remind everyone, it's like, this is a non-binding referendum. Town meeting cannot order the board to do anything. So you are listening to the public, of course, but not bound to do anything with this article. And there's just so much to unpack in that article that has nothing to do with the residential tax exemption. And I think that's the unfortunate part of this petitioned article, is that it doesn't ask a straightforward question.
It's a stall, in my opinion. It's just,
Yes.
hey, let's put
Yeah.
the brakes on and let's take a step back and look at everything.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's necessary. I think Rich and the Finance Committee we're lucky to have enough said on that. So it's a difficult situation for a lot of people.
It is.
Can I belabor the point?
Yeah,
Yes,
belabor.
absolutely.
Anyone can, Rich.
Beat a dead horse, whatever, man.
we already voted, so.
Yeah.
Bob mentioned an audit. I was an auditor for 20 years. I owned a pretty successful auditing firm working for the smallest of towns in the
Put that in
state,
the summary. Oh, sorry.
from the towns of Truro and Chilmark and Aquina, all the way up to the city of Providence. Auditors don't provide rulings of fact. They provide their opinion. So, I know it's semantics, but an auditor doesn't provide, is just another opinion. And I'm not sure I would substitute other people's opinion for necessarily mine. And B, definitely throughout the process that we go through with the 9 members of the finance committee who also have an opinion. And then substituting all that wisdom that you get to, as a board, glean from all of us doing this for your wisdom and your opinion. Because a lot of these things aren't fact, they're, subjective. And, so when people hear the word audit, they think someone's going to come in and lay down the law and tell you this is what you're supposed to do. And that's not what an auditor is to do. Auditors provide an opinion as to the fairness of your financial statements or that you've complied with laws and regulations. And the opinions on all those things are going to be, yes, we have. And that's what we get every year, the financial audit. This would just be another opinion, substituting it for the, 14, 15 other opinions we got going on. And, the opinions of the 5,500 people that live in town and the non-residents, so.
All right. All right, that's all we got on warrant articles. So next we have select board policy on remote meetings.
Ooh,
Um,
haven't gotten any update.
yeah, we don't have any update from the state
So
yet.
we better make a change.
Yeah, so
Legislation processing through the,
Yeah, but it hasn't gone
hasn't
through.
passed
if
yet.
if it isn't here by the end of, by next week,
Oh.
It'll pass on March 30th at 11:50.
Made a post on Facebook making it sound like they did it.
Well, it's part of that new municipal
modernization.
Yeah.
Them in their
So, and that's
headlines.
not getting put through before our next meeting.
Right.
Okay.
Um,
So I think it'd be.
Our policy was created when, we had a telephone in the center. of
No
the
one knew about
table.
Zoom.
It seems amazing to me, but we actually functioned or sort of tried to
I
function.
still
that way.
remember the first meeting in COVID. And there were
This
3 of us sitting here, spaced
Yeah.
way apart, and I had 9 FinCom members on the phone.
And we had Bill.
And I had the list, I had the list of all the FinCom
Right,
members. I
legal,
said, don't
yeah.
say anything until I call your name.
Hellish, yeah.
It was
So that's
cumbersome.
why we haven't updated it. That's
Yeah.
why we need to.
Okay.
So my suggestion is, some of the things have to stay, like we have to keep a quorum of the public body
Right.
has to be in the room.
Uh-huh.
But we had no more than 1 member may participate remotely before.
Right.
So I think we should just take that out,
Yep.
that
Right.
whole line.
Okay.
And then also the reasons for,
Where's the
We don't
down
need
below, the
reasons.
procedures.
Yeah.
Just say in the first one, say their desire to participate remotely, period.
That's it. yeah.
Don't say give the reason. And then below that, starting meeting chair shall announce anyone participating remotely and take out the reason.
Right.
There are some reasons listed up above, but they're general, so it's not anything specific.
And what was the first one?
The
we're gonna
first
do?
one was, well, we'll keep the quorum,
Okay.
take out number 2,
Just take it out.
take it out
because
completely.
The quorum has to be here physically, but anybody else can
Right.
join in.
Right,
Hang
okay.
on to quorum.
Right, no matter how
Yeah.
many you have, and then take out those 2,
Okay.
the
Perfect.
reason down below, and that's it.
That's it.
All right, so I'll make a motion to re-adopt or amend, I guess, our remote policy from 2017.
Except
April
our,
3rd.
except our remote policy with amendments.
Yes.
Second.
All right, any more discussion?
Do we have committees that are still meeting fully remote?
No,
No. Okay. All right. That's all.
I believe
I
so.
don't think so, because it was the human services was for.
And conscom,
It was
Conscom.
It was
Long
Concom.
time.
I should have just asked
Oh.
Karen.
yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think they still set up in the back room.
Their meeting
Like
is
one
actually
person.
what, the first?
It's the second and
second.
fourth.
So it might be
Tuesdays
okay. The governor might have passed something.
by then. Okay. All right. I just didn't know if this would then require boards to have a physically present.
Yes.
Yes.
So it would.
Yes.
Would.
It would.
Oh,
It would if the state doesn't extend the current provisions, which right now you do not have to have anybody in the room. We could all be remote.
Right. But if
This
the
is
state
our
does-
fallback.
If the state does extend it.
Right. This
No
is,
problem. If not, some of them have to
Okay.
be in the room.
All right.
4 of them.
Okay.
I think, right? Because there's 7. Yeah.
All right.
There should be.
Five.
We can, I think, vote without Jamie. So we'll call the roll. Bob,
Yes.
Suzanne,
Yes.
Jerry,
Yes.
and myself, I. So
Okay.
4-0. Driving access to aquaculture grant.
So I don't know if this was understandable to you, but basically, there's one grant holder on the other side of where we allow driving, right? He's accessing his grant from South Sunken Meadow. And he's not supposed to be driving on the beach. But he had his product off and he wanted special permission at least twice a year to bring it on and take it off. The Conscom said, that's fine as long as the select board and the town manager agree. I stepped in and gave him temporary permission because his little, remember when it was warm for 5 days in a row and the clams and oysters were dying, so they had to go out. So I gave him permission to do it that once, but basically we are still working to try and get him a route that doesn't go over the upland property owners that are now saying they do not want him to use the route.
So you had this for this month,
Yes.
but there is no taken off at the end of the year.
No, there isn't. They've just
Okay.
given him one-time permission
Okay,
and we're
so
hoping
it's sort
to
of
work out
retroactive
something.
because he's
Yes.
already done it.
Exactly, but I felt badly that,
Yeah.
he had to do it and I
It's
hadn't
baby,
discussed it
you
with
don't
you,
want-
so
you
I
wanna get
wanted
the
you to
baby-
know about.
Yeah.
And so basically, we're looking at, for the future, this is not our vote, but for the future, try and find a route,
Correct.
Yeah, and they've been,
acceptable route.
honestly, the conservation agent, natural resources have been working on this and will continue to try and work on finding him a legal way to get to his grant, because he's an older gentleman at this point. He's not no longer a spring.
And I'm sure they'll
Wow.
come back before he wants to take things off
Yes.
in the fall. So
All right.
this is a temporary,
What does
It's
that-
just sort of a
basically-
FYI so that you
Yeah.
know, and.
It's
but-
ratifying what you already.
Yes,
did.
I would
Yeah, it's a
appreciate
good-
if you would ratify it.
yes.
It's a good idea.
All right, so I'll make a motion that we approve the driving access to the aquaculture grant to Russ Sandblum off 650 Sunken Meadow Road.
I'll
Second.
All right, any more discussion? All right, we'll call the roll. Bob,
Aye.
Jamie,
Aye.
Suzanne,
Yes.
Jerry,
Yes.
and myself, I. All right, sanctuary for gender diversity. We had a woman come, a person come last week. Yeah.
Yeah.
Robin, and I don't want to butcher her last name, so I'm just going to use Robin.
Robin came. Right.
And Jamie asked that we put this on the agenda. So Jamie, I'm going to let you,
And I gave you the whole
Worcester.
whole Worcester thing. I don't know if we need to be that formal, but
14 whereases.
yeah, 14 whereas.
I mean, I think we can substitute, wherever it says City Council of Worcester to
Select board.
Select Board Town of
Okay.
Eastham pretty easily.
Right.
There was one that I talked about, a youth health survey conducted in Worcester's Division of Public Health that probably doesn't need to be in
Right.
there. But otherwise, it was pretty,
Okay.
My thought was to just try and be pretty simple on this. To say Eastham is a welcoming town. Everyone's welcome. We're not going to, our police are here for safety of all our citizens. We're not going to go against medical advice or anything try and make it just straightforward. This is,
Jerry, I think it's more comforting though to have it laid out, I
Right,
think.
because as you get into some of that terminology, it becomes very subjective and it can be manipulated, whereas I think having 14 whereases, it makes it very clear cut that,
And I can also try and do a draft for you that's
maybe
a little simpler. I don't know, that takes out all the Worcester stuff and maybe the whereases, because we might not need all.
some of them, yeah. I understand. I'm totally in,
Mhm.
I'm
Yeah.
in favor of this, but I want everyone to feel welcome in
course.
Eastham, and we're not gonna go out and try and go after people. If someone is a safety problem for us, that's what the chief is gonna take care of. It'd be great to just have a positive statement that Eastham welcomes all.
But it's not just welcoming. It needs to be a safe place
It's
for all.
protecting.
Okay, all right, that's fine with
Protecting.
me. It's a safe place. Bob
I
is-
think we need the word protecting in there, but I agree with
Okay.
Jerry. Wish we could simplify it.
Yeah.
But it may
Safe
be
place for
more,
all.
it may be very important to be specific about some of these items. I have never addressed anything like this, but I can tell you that I agree with simplification. But if you guys believe that we need this level of detail, then that's fine too.
Yeah.
But I think maybe, yeah, I think you're right, Jackie. Somewhere in the middle is
Yeah, yeah,
probably a
right.
good spot to be.
Exactly.
You know, because I agree, it could be simplified from where it is, but at the same time, you don't want to go to the other side.
Right.
But if you vote to do it, then I can bring back a draft and then
Great.
you can accept the draft, something
Vote
like
for you
that.
to prepare a draft.
And
Okay, I can easily make that.
I'm
motion.
sorry I didn't.
No, no,
No,
no.
no, no,
Okay.
listen, this is fine. This is,
I mean.
This is
we're
our
doing
first
it,
crack.
And that's,
Yes.
that's
right.
a major
Yes.
thing.
and
we're gonna do it.
And in talking to Karen, because she really likes writing sort of things, she likes giving like Karen Strauss, giving like a statement of purpose or like a little narrative at the beginning. So possibly
Oh, okay.
that's where the like, you
That
know,
everybody
the like,
should-
that's where like the simplified, this is like the feeling and
And then
impetus
the-
of doing this. And then you have like the legal language
Right.
that
Okay.
supports it. So you could
Right.
read the
Little blurb.
the little blurb and be like, oh, okay. Or if you really want to read like the more legal part, you could read that. So
Everyone should feel safe in
Yeah.
Eastham
Protected.
and protected. All right, safe, protected, and welcome. Whatever.
Bingo. Or else if you don't feel that way about transgender and diversity, then I don't know what you're doing on Cape Cod.
Right?
well, at least not this end of the Cape.
All right, so we'll look forward to
All right.
something
I'll get
All
the
right,
funds
Jake.
granted.
in possibly April sometime when we.
Yeah, hopefully by the 7th, if we have a meeting on the 7th.
Okay.
It's like we're trying to have a meeting on the 7th now because we have
Not
aquaculture
Jamie.
grants.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
So we have to do
I'll have to
something.
be
but-
remote on
Okay.
that one, but that's okay. I can
Okay.
do it.
Okay. Did not you, Suzanne?
I
It's
We'll be
okay. You don't have to get.
We just need 3.
we're
Hopefully,
just
Bob, will
gonna-
you be
if
back?
We
Be in
don't
the
have 3,
room?
we'll just kick it off, but I'd rather try to do it.
I'll be back on the 31st of this
Great.
month. I'll
yeah,
be
I'll
back.
be on a plane.
Okay, so.
So even
Bob
if
will be
he's
here.
remote
I have to be.
and I'll
remote.
be here, we can,
Still have quorum.
but so maybe we'll wait to do this until we have everybody here.
Hopefully the
But I can
state
send it
passes
out
the
to
thing.
you.
Yes, she can send it out and we
Because you
can,
won't have a quorum in the
Right.
room.
Okay. that's
All right.
good.
town managers report.
Don't think I have
See
anything.
her smiley new face here.
really, big. We're gonna keep the Wednesday talks until after town meeting and then we might come up with a different thing. Is that
How
right?
have they been going?
Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry. They've been going really, really well.
Okay.
Wonderful.
It's really lovely. And I mean, we've had a few upset residents
Yeah.
because they, just found out about wastewater and they didn't know or whatever. But I totally understand what they're saying to us. And so I think it'll obviously, when we have public process, when we have public input, it makes everything we do better. So we encourage that. So it's been good. And we also, encouragingly, we have quite a few people who come just to tell us they think we're doing a great job
Oh,
and they appreciate us,
All right.
which is kind of amazing. So
Nice.
there's more of that. And then a lot of people just ask questions or want to talk. I mean, Rich did a whole budget summary for a couple of residents and, it's been very, very good.
Jackie, do you think,
I do think
People-
I should probably do it in different places at different times. So, yeah.
people stop all of us, know we're on the board and so forth and say things, but to talk to us kind of it's here at a public hearing or right before a meeting,
Yeah.
what's on the agenda, and that's difficult for some people. It's kind of public speak. Does it make any sense to think about once or twice a year, one of us appear or will go there with you and it rotate? and it
Jamie's done it.
rotates?
Yeah, you can do it. So like, you can just
Ooh.
decide to go to the library and just decide to have public hours. I try to do it
And we will
once
publicize
a
it for you.
year where I do a couple days.
It's a great idea. People appreciate it and they
Go to
will
the swap
talk,
shop.
they will talk to
Go
you
to the
about
swap shop.
things
Go
that
to the
they
dump.
won't come and talk at meetings.
Right.
And, you know, I think in the past, we've had some select board members who have done it and they haven't known the answer to all the questions. Well,
That's also
nobody
okay.
has the answer to all the questions. And I just keep a notebook and I write down people's names and, you
Let
know,
them know.
Get back
phone
to
number
them.
and I get back to people. But it's,
Yeah.
it's generally a positive
And I
experience.
usually just post it on Facebook and put it in the community space
Well, that-
pages, or you can tell Jackie and they can put it
Kayla
on
will
social,
send it out on, yeah,
All right,
Facebook and stuff.
that's interesting. It may be, well, that could be haphazard, but one of the things to think about, not to decide today, maybe we try and set up kind of a schedule thing, so people
That would be
know-
great.
So that they know that Jackie is gonna show up on Wednesday at the library, at least right now they do. But maybe a select board member will be at the library or here or something to just meet with you
Saturday.
on a set, yeah.
And I also have a
this-
gig at the COA if anyone would like to come with me on that day too, Rich.
Well, when I happened to be at
In
the
April.
library when Rich sat in for Jackie on a Wednesday. I rode over there with him and I got snagged by three
Yep.
people just as I was waiting for a ride.
Yeah, yeah.
So just, they were there to talk to Rich, but
They hit you, yeah.
they hit me
I
up.
just
So I
think
mean, you
it's
could just
worth-
kind of piggyback on that.
I think that would be, I thought about it, I haven't done it, Jamie, I tip my hat to you if I had one on, for doing it, but I think that's a good way to have the members of the board get some more feedback from the people we represent, and that's a
Definitely.
good idea to work on, and
And explain things. I mean, it really is an educational opportunity. It's a,
yeah.
you know, if there's a misunderstanding in information, which often happens, you know, you can correct
Right.
that.
Yeah.
And it also it's a, oh, sorry. Go.
Oh, I was just gonna say that Truro does this, but they do it separately. So the town manager has had their hours and the select board had their hours, and then Brewster does town manager and select board member together in one session, and it rotates the place and
Yeah.
Oh,
the
nice.
member.
Well, that's a good.
I mean,
that's
it's
a-
not a new thing.
Yeah.
People
I
do
just-
it, but yeah.
That's good
We-
input.
Yeah, well, and I spoke to the Provincetown Independent asking me questions, and I says, that might be a good idea, so.
Yes,
The
exactly.
reporters, so tip my hat, it wasn't, it was Tyler was
Ah.
talking to me, but that's all right. He's not. It's all right. Okay.
All right. All right,
One
so
minute.
new and upcoming agenda items.
No, we have enough.
Yeah,
On our plate right now.
We have enough, yeah, we get.
All right, so minutes, I had Kayla put them in the packet instead of having them in separate.
That's actually
It used to be like that,
really
you know, when we
handy.
I know.
But
I don't know either.
It happened a few years ago and yeah, so I said, can you just put them back in there? Cause half the time I forget to go look at them and then I'm reading them while we're sitting here.
It's not loading or, yeah.
So I have one little edit on the February 24th one before we vote under the open meeting law complaint. I think the end of the sentence should say, the final sentence should say, the entire board agree that it is not evident that there's any open meeting law violation.
Okay.
Right.
Which meeting date was
Should
that?
say violation.
24th.
24th?
It was
Okay.
actually-
Oh, there it is.
was a
Yes,
complaint,
yes,
there
yes,
was
yes,
no
yes.
violation.
It says
I-
complaint
Violation.
now.
Yeah.
Should say
Yeah.
violation.
I have.
Oh.
Okay, so with that edit.
One more edit,
Oh.
my name is spelled incorrectly
Oh.
twice.
Oh, yeah.
CERS is CERASALE.
Okay.
Yep, in that.
They've got
in
it,
that
they've got
meeting.
it up top, right, but they don't have it, All
In
the
the
way,
body.
it's, no, 3 times.
Three
Four
times.
times, 4 times, 5
You're a
times.
fool.
Maybe
All of
That's
them.
okay. All of them
Word-
except the
word
top one,
select.
6 times,
Okay,
whatever.
fix
Okay.
Jerry's name. All right. With those changes, I'll make a motion to accept the minutes of Monday, February 24th.
Second,
All right, anything else? All right, we'll call the vote. Bob,
aye.
Jamie,
Aye.
Suzanne,
Yes.
Jerry,
Yes,
myself, aye. And we have the minutes of
March
Monday,
3rd.
March 3rd. I'll make a motion to accept those.
Second.
well, second, and again, it's my name at a couple of spots.
Not in the beginning, though. huh?
Not in the beginning, right at the end.
Beginning, all right.
Last two on FY 25 and on adjournment.
All right. So with those changes, we'll call the vote. Bob,
Aye.
Jamie,
Aye.
Suzanne,
Yes.
Jerry,
Yes,
and myself, aye.
Yeah.
And then we have Monday, March 17th, and we're all caught up then after this. So I'll make a motion to approve Monday, March 17th.
second. And my
Yeah,
only
same thing.
change, in a couple of spots, it's spelled correctly, other few spots it's not. So just add
All
another.
right, with
vowel.
those minor changes, I'll call the vote. Bob,
Yes.
Jamie,
Aye.
Suzanne,
Yes.
Jerry,
Yes,
and myself, aye. All right, and that is it. Any other business?
I move we adjourn.
Second.
Second,
All right, we'll call the roll. Bob,
aye.
Jamie,
Aye.
Suzanne,
Yes.
Jerry,
Yes.
myself, aye. Oh, it's
Lost you guys. Muted,
Thanks,
I guess. When
Bob.
you're-
Take
Have a
care.
good evening,
Safe trip
guys.
back.
Thank you. Enjoy yourselves. Have a good evening.